Hi guys, and welcome to the Gentle History Podcast. Tonight we are stepping into the winter of 1849 onto a lonely stretch of the Oregon Trail, where the sky has disappeared behind a curtain of snow. The wagon wheels have stopped turning, and somewhere beneath a trembling canvas cover, a child is asking whether you will be moving again tomorrow. You cannot see much beyond the oxen. Snow spins sideways through the gathering darkness, stinging your cheeks and settling inside your collar. Your boots are wet, your fingers ache. Someone inside the wagon is coughing, slowly and deeply, while another child complains that their feet have gone numb, and, just to establish expectations, you probably will not survive this if you treat the blizzard like an inconvenient camping trip. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Along with your local time, it is always comforting to imagine people scattered around the world, safely tucked into beds while you, unfortunately, are about to sleep in a wagon during a 19th century snowstorm. Now, dim the lights and listen to the wind. It moves across the open country with a low, endless voice, rushing through dry grass that is rapidly vanishing beneath fresh snow. The sound presses against the wagon canvas above you, making it snap and flutter against the curved wooden boughs every few moments. A stronger gust arrives and the whole cover seems to inhale. You stand beside the wagon for a moment longer than you should. The evening is fading quickly. In 1849, thousands of emigrants are travelling west across North America, following routes that have become famous under names like the Oregon Trail and California Trail. Many are drawn by farmland, opportunity, family connections, or the enormous excitement surrounding gold discoveries in California. Yet whatever dream began the journey, the practical experience is surprisingly unromantic. You walk a lot. Covered wagons are not comfortable passenger coaches carrying cheerful families through picturesque scenery. Most emigrants walk beside them because the wagons are already burdened with food, tools, bedding, clothing, cookware, spare parts, and whatever pieces of home seemed impossible to abandon. Tonight, however, walking is no longer an option. Snow has swallowed the trail. You look back toward the faint grooves where the wheels passed earlier, but those tracks are already filling. Another hour of this and there may be nothing left to follow. Your youngest child stands close to the rear wheel, wrapped in a blanket that is much too large. Only a small face appears above the folds. Are we stopping? Yes. You do not say how long. Inside the wagon, someone coughs again. The sick traveller has been weak since yesterday morning. Perhaps it is a fever, perhaps an infection, perhaps simple exhaustion complicated by cold and poor food. Medical diagnosis on the trail is often a mixture of experience, household remedies, hopeful guessing, and whatever advice another traveller confidently remembers hearing from somebody in Missouri. That confidence, naturally, does not guarantee competence. You pull the canvas flap aside. The interior smells of damp wool, flour, leather, smoke, and human bodies that have spent months living at extremely close range. There is also a faint medicinal smell from a bottle tucked near the bedding. The sick traveller lies beneath quilts near the centre, eyes closed, breathing through parted lips. A child whispers, "Are they worse?" You touch the patient's forehead. Warm. Too warm. Perhaps. But your own fingers are so cold that almost anything would feel warm. Historians still argue whether emigrant diaries sometimes exaggerated particular moments of hardship because dramatic events were naturally more likely to be recorded than ordinary evenings. What is beyond dispute is that disease kills far more travellers on many stretches of the overland routes than dramatic attacks or spectacular accidents do. Cholera is especially feared during the Great Migration years, although respiratory illness, dysentery, exhaustion, injury, and fever can all turn an uncomfortable journey into a dangerous one. And now you have illness, children, snow, and perhaps an hour of usable light. Wonderful. You lower the flap and turn toward the animals. The oxen stand with their backs angled against the wind. Snow collects along their shoulders. Their breath rises in pale clouds before being torn away. These animals are among your most valuable possessions, though they possess the irritating habit of requiring food at precisely the moments when finding food becomes impossible. You listen for bells. Some emigrants hang bells on livestock, useful for locating animals when grazing. The gentle sound can become so familiar that silence itself feels suspicious. Tonight the wind nearly consumes every noise, but somewhere beyond the wagon comes a dull metallic note. Clink, then nothing. Clink. At least something is still where it should be. You step toward the front wheel and sink nearly to your ankle. The snow is accumulating faster now. Earlier, the flakes had been soft and scattered, almost pleasant. One of the children tried catching them on a mitten. Nobody's doing that anymore. The transformation is unsettling. A landscape that seemed broad and open this afternoon now feels enclosed. The horizon has vanished. Distance has vanished. Even direction becomes uncertain when every glance meets moving white. You rub your hands together. There is a peculiar trail habit worth remembering here. Travellers sometimes discard possessions as loads become too heavy, leaving objects scattered beside the route: furniture, books, tools, trunks. Even cherished household items can be abandoned when animals weaken. Some accounts describe stretches of trail decorated with the remains of domestic ambitions. Imagine carrying a treasured chair hundreds of miles, only to discover that the chair has become your enemy. Tonight you would happily trade several chairs for dry firewood. But there are no chairs. There is only the wagon, the animals, the family, the sick traveller, and whatever supplies remain packed inside. Another gust hits. The wagon creaks. The children look toward you. This is the quiet burden of being the adult in a crisis. You are allowed to be frightened, but everyone else keeps checking your face to determine whether they should be frightened too. So you make your expression boring. Boring is reassuring. You tell them the storm is strong, but the wagon is strong too. That is only partly true. A covered wagon is built for movement, not for becoming a winter cabin. The canvas provides shade and some protection from rain, dust, and wind. But it is not an insulated wall. Cold air finds openings, moisture gathers, snow can weigh against the cover. Everything depends upon how well you prepare before darkness makes every simple task harder. You glance west, or what you think is west. The final daylight is draining from the clouds, turning the snow from grey to blue. There will be no more miles tonight. No distant campfire appears through the storm. No friendly wagon rolls into view. You cannot assume another party is nearby. Even on a route travelled by thousands, companies spread apart, families become separated, weather changes schedules. For this evening, your entire world is perhaps 20 feet across. The sick traveller murmurs inside. A child begins shivering. The oxen shift again. You reach for the wagon side, feeling cold wood beneath your palm, and begin thinking through the immediate problems. Shelter first, then animals, then fire, if you can manage it, then food, then warmth, then the patient, then somehow sleep. The list feels longer than the remaining daylight. Snow gathers on your sleeve while you stand there, each flake delicate enough to melt against skin, yet together capable of stopping hundreds of pounds of wagon, livestock, supplies, and human determination. You brush it away. There is work to do before night closes around you completely. And as the wind pushes harder against the canvas, you turn the wagon into the storm, and begin making a camp in a place where you never intended to stop. You begin with the wagon itself, because in weather like this, a few yards of canvas and a wooden box suddenly matter more than almost anything you own. The wind is coming across the open ground from your right, striking the broad side of the wagon and making the canvas shudder. That will not do. If the gusts strengthen during the night, the wagon will catch them like a sail, except there is nowhere useful for you to sail. You call to the older children and tell them to stay close. One holds the blanket around the youngest. Another stands beside the wheel with shoulders raised against the cold, watching you with the solemn expression children acquire when they realize the adults are improvising. You walk several paces into the snow. The ground beneath your boots feels firm enough, but visibility is shrinking. You can still make out a shallow depression ahead. Perhaps where the land drops slightly, it might offer protection from the wind. Or it might collect drifting snow. That is the problem with choosing a campsite in a blizzard. The landscape is being rewritten while you look at it. You decide to remain where the wagon has stopped. On ground that seems relatively level and exposed enough that you can judge what the snow is doing. The next problem is orientation. Ideally, you want the smallest possible surface facing the strongest wind. You cannot simply pick up a loaded wagon and rotate it like furniture in a bedroom. Though at this moment you would appreciate that feature, you speak softly to the oxen and take hold of the necessary gear. Their hides are dusted white, their heads hang low, and they seem deeply unimpressed by the entire Oregon experience. Fair enough. Oxen are widely used on the overland trails because they are generally cheaper than horses, strong, and capable of living on rougher forage. They also tend to be less tempting to thieves than fine horses. They are slow, certainly, but speed is rarely the main advantage when you're trying to move a household across a continent. You guide the team carefully. The wagon wheels resist. Snow has already gathered around them, and beneath the snow the earth is becoming slick. Wood creaks. Harness shifts. The oxen lean forward. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the wagon lurches. Inside comes a startled cry. You immediately stop. The sick traveller has been resting among the bedding, and every violent movement risks making an unpleasant condition worse. You call through the canvas that everything is all right. It is not exactly all right. But nobody has fallen out. Standards are flexible tonight. You move again, slowly, until the wagon stands at a better angle to the wind. It is not perfect, but perfection belongs to people with houses. You secure the wheels as best you can. Wagon brakes exist, but on uncertain ground you also want to prevent unwanted movement. Stones would help, though finding stones beneath fresh snow in fading light is an irritating little treasure hunt. You scrape with your boot until you uncover hard earth and something solid enough to wedge near a wheel. Your fingers are losing sensitivity. That worries you. You flex them repeatedly and tuck them beneath your arms for a moment. Cold injuries are not understood in precisely the modern clinical language you might expect. But travellers certainly know that prolonged exposure can damage hands, feet, ears, and faces. Practical knowledge matters even when medical explanations remain incomplete. The children are beginning to stamp their feet. You give them work. Work is useful because it keeps bodies moving and minds occupied. The older child gathers loose pieces of wood from beneath the wagon and from the supply bundle. The younger one is told to brush snow away from the wagon entrance. This task accomplishes almost nothing. That is not the point. The child attacks the snow with tremendous seriousness, pushing it aside with a small piece of board. Within seconds, the wind replaces it. The child pushes again. There is something admirable about this. Also something extremely Oregon Trail about it. You turn your attention to fuel. Firewood has been an ongoing concern across the journey. On some stretches of the overland trails, timber is scarce, forcing emigrants to burn whatever combustible material they can find. And yes, that includes dried buffalo dung. There is your quirky trail detail for the evening. Travellers sometimes call these dried pieces buffalo chips, and they can burn surprisingly well when properly dry. They are not the romantic crackling logs of a cosy fireplace, but when you need heat for coffee or supper, dignity becomes a luxury item, unfortunately. Tonight everything nearby is either buried, damp, or being carried sideways by the wind. You have saved a modest supply of dry fuel with the wagon. Not enough. Never enough. You inspect what remains. A few pieces of wood. Some kindling, possibly material that can be sacrificed if absolutely necessary. The temptation is to build a large fire immediately. Your wet clothes want it. Your aching fingers want it. Every child in the wagon definitely wants it. But a large fire consumes fuel quickly. And this storm may last through the night or longer. So you think small. A cooking fire first, sheltered from the worst wind. You choose a position close enough to the wagon for convenience, but far enough that sparks will not reach the canvas. Covered wagons contain cloth, dry goods, bedding, wooden fittings, and other things that have an unfortunate relationship with flame. You scrape snow aside. Beneath it, the ground is damp and cold. You arrange your fuel carefully, shielding the tiny beginnings of the fire with your body. The wind reaches around you anyway. The first attempt fails. The second produces smoke. The third catches. A thin flame appears, trembling violently. You stare at it as if you have personally invented fire. The older child crouches beside you. Is that enough? It will be. Again, confidence first, accuracy later. You add fuel cautiously. The flame strengthens. Smoke rolls low before being swept away into darkness. Historians continue to debate how consistently emigrant parties followed formal camp routines, because diaries describe everything from disciplined wagon companies with assigned responsibilities to families making decisions according to immediate circumstances. Leadership could be organised, improvised, contested, or occasionally ignored. The popular image of wagons always forming a perfect defensive circle is especially misleading. Terrain, time, grazing needs, and simple practicality often determined how wagons were arranged. Tonight there is no circle. There is only a wagon. The thought makes the surrounding whiteness feel larger. You glance into the storm, half expecting another campfire to appear. Nothing. You hear the canvas snapping behind you. The sick traveller coughs. One of the children calls your name. You stand and return to the wagon. The cover needs attention before the snow grows heavier. You inspect the ropes and fastenings, tightening what has loosened. The canvas is stretched over wooden bows rising above the wagon bed. Snow does not simply disappear when it lands there. If accumulation becomes heavy, you may need to knock it away during the night. You run a hand along the canvas. Cold, wet, flexible for now. You check the rear opening and adjust the flap so that it reduces the draft without sealing everyone inside too tightly. Ventilation matters, particularly if damp clothes and several breathing bodies share a tiny enclosed space. The interior is already changing. Children have moved bedding. Bundles have shifted. The patient is tucked deeper beneath quilts. A cup has fallen onto its side. Your household has become a puzzle in which every object occupies space needed by another object. Outside, you still have the animals to secure. You cannot simply unhitch them and hope for the best. They need protection from the wind if possible, access to whatever feed you can spare, and a secure arrangement that prevents them wandering into the white darkness. Losing an ox on an ordinary evening is serious. Losing one tonight could strand you long after the snow stops. You work through the harness, your hands clumsy with cold. Leather feels stiff. Metal feels vicious against bare skin. The animals breathe heavily as you release them from the immediate burden of the wagon. You lead them toward the sheltered side, using the wagon itself as a barrier against some of the wind. There is little grazing now. The grass has disappeared. You bring out feed reluctantly. Every mouth consumes something you may need tomorrow, yet tomorrow requires living animals, so they eat. Their jaws move steadily while snow settles along their backs. You listen to that slow chewing, oddly peaceful beneath the wind. Darkness finally arrives without ceremony. One moment you can still distinguish the ground from the sky. Then everything beyond the fire becomes black and white movement. You gather the children close to the wagon. The youngest is shivering hard now. You send them inside. The older child hesitates. Do you need help? You look at the fire, at the animals, at the ropes, at the snow already gathering around the wheels again. Yes, you say softly. Hold the light. A lantern glows beside you, small and golden. Together you make one final circuit around the wagon. You check each fastening. You check the wheels. You check the animals. You push more snow away from the entrance. You cover the fuel. You make certain the cooking fire can be managed safely. The preparations are imperfect, hurried, and painfully ordinary. That is what survival often looks like. Not heroics. Just remembering one more rope, one more blanket, one more handful of feed, one more child who needs dry socks. When you finally lift the rear flap, warmth does not greet you, only a different kind of cold. Inside, bodies have already crowded together beneath quilts and blankets. Damp clothing hangs wherever space permits. Supplies press against the wagon walls. The patient lies motionless near the centre. You climb in. The wooden bed shifts beneath your weight. Behind you, you pull the canvas flap closed against the storm. The wind becomes muffled but not distant. You can hear every gust, every creak, every breath. And now, with the wagon positioned, the animals secured, the fuel protected, and the darkness complete, you begin the difficult business of fitting an entire frightened household beneath a canvas roof scarcely thicker than the clothes on your back. You lower yourself carefully into the wagon, trying not to place a knee on a child, a cooking pot, the medicine bottle, or anything else that would make this evening noticeably worse. There is barely room to turn around. The wagon bed beneath you is roughly the size of a very small modern room, except your modern room probably does not contain sacks of flour, tools, spare clothing, cookware, bedding, food stores, several children, one feverish adult, and half the practical possessions required to begin a new life hundreds of miles from where you started. You pull the canvas flap closed at once. The storm changes character. Outside, the wind had been enormous, filling the entire landscape. In here, it becomes intimate. Canvas trembles inches from your head. Ropes tap against wood. The wagon boughs creak softly whenever a gust pushes against the cover. Snow brushes the canvas with a dry whisper. Then another gust comes. The whole wagon gives a tiny shudder. The youngest child looks up. Is it going to blow away? You consider several answers. No, simple answers are useful. You begin arranging everyone for the night, though arranging is perhaps generous. What you're actually doing is solving a human puzzle in the dark. The sick traveller needs the warmest position you can manage, away from the entrance and protected from drafts. The smallest children need to be near adults. Wet clothing must not soak the bedding. Supplies cannot be left where someone will kick them over. The lantern needs a safe place. The medicine must remain reachable. And you need somewhere to exist. That last requirement has apparently been overlooked by the wagon designers. Most wagons used by overland emigrants are relatively compact farm wagons, rather than the enormous freight wagons sometimes shown in popular imagery. A family might load one with perhaps a ton or more of supplies depending on the wagon. Animals, road conditions, and judgment of the travellers. Every pound matters because the team must pull it across plains, rivers, deserts, hills, mud, and mountains. That is why emigrants usually walk. It's also why the inside of your wagon does not resemble a charming little bedroom on wheels. There's no proper mattress waiting for you, no tidy row of bunks, no tiny frontier wardrobe with matching curtains. You have blankets, quilts, perhaps straw or other padding, sacks, boxes, and whatever soft materials can be persuaded to serve as bedding. You spread a blanket along the wagon bed. The wood beneath it is hard. A child sits down. This is lumpy. Yes. There is no point lying about everything. You help remove wet outer clothing. This becomes urgent because snow that looked harmless outside has melted into sleeves, hems, stockings, and shoes. Moisture is the enemy tonight. Wet fabric steals warmth. And the wagon provides no convenient drying room. You hang garments from ropes and wagon bows where possible. Soon shirts, stockings, and cloth pieces dangle overhead. The youngest child points upward. It looks funny. It does. Your temporary home now resembles a laundry shop being shaken by an earthquake. A damp stocking swings gently above the sick traveller's head. You move it. Some dignity must survive. The air smells strongly of wool. Wet wool has a particular smell. Earthy and animal, mixed tonight with leather, canvas, old smoke, food, and the sour trace of illness. You notice another smell too. Feet. Of course. You have been travelling for months. Regular bathing on the trail is possible when water, weather, time, and privacy cooperate, but nobody is enjoying a hot shower at the end of each dusty day. Clothes are washed when circumstances permit. Bodies are cleaned as well as practical. And tonight nobody is volunteering to bathe in snow. You tuck the smallest child beneath a quilt. Cold hands immediately find your arm. Your hands are warm. They are not. But compared with the child's fingers, apparently you are a stove. You rub those small hands gently between yours. Near the centre of the wagon, the patient stirs. You lean closer. The face is pale in the lantern light, except for flushed cheeks. Breathing sounds rough. You offer a little water. The patient drinks only a few swallows. You do not force more. That problem belongs to later. For now, everyone needs to settle. Privacy is another casualty of overland travel. Families may sleep close together, camp close to other families, wash near rivers used by entire wagon companies, and conduct ordinary bodily routines with far less separation than many modern listeners would consider comfortable. Even relieving yourself can become a logistical adventure, especially during a blizzard. There is no convenient bathroom beyond the canvas. There is merely outside. Outside is currently trying to freeze you. So you make arrangements for the children and hope nobody develops an urgent digestive crisis before morning. Historians have long debated how much the overland journey altered expectations of domestic privacy, particularly for women whose diaries sometimes reveal the strain of performing household labour in exposed camps and crowded conditions. Some scholars emphasise the disruption of familiar gendered domestic spaces, while others point out that travellers worked hard to recreate routines of home wherever they stopped. You can feel both possibilities inside this wagon. There is no kitchen, yet someone still cooks. There is no bedroom, yet someone still tucks children beneath quilts. There is no sick room, yet someone still places a cool cloth against a fevered forehead. Home has not vanished. It has become portable and extremely cramped. You shift a flour sack away from the bedding. A surprisingly common trail problem is the simple damage caused by packing. Containers break, flour gets wet, sugar spills, bacon grease finds places bacon grease should never reach. Fragile possessions bounce for hundreds of miles over rough ground. Some emigrants learn to pack and repack with almost military precision. Others learn after discovering that a poorly secured frying pan can become a remarkably energetic object on a steep descent. You make sure yours is wedged safely away. No one needs to be attacked by cookware tonight. The lantern flame flickers. You lower it slightly. Light is comforting, but fuel matters, An open flame inside a canvas-covered wagon deserves respect. You do not want to survive the blizzard only to set your shelter on fire. The children settle closer together. One whispers something, another giggles. The sound surprises you. For a few seconds, the wagon feels almost normal. You ask what is funny. Nothing. Apparently. Children have the remarkable ability to discover comedy in circumstances adults have correctly identified as miserable. You rearrange the quilts. The sick traveller receives more layers, but not so many that the heat becomes oppressive. Another blanket goes over the children. You keep one near yourself. Your boots remain close to the entrance. You do not want them freezing solid. Outside. The oxen shift. A bell gives a faint note. Clink. You listen. Clink. Then the wind swallows it. The wagon rocks slightly. Snow is beginning to gather against the lower canvas and wheels. And oddly enough, some accumulation may eventually reduce drafts near the wagon bed, but too much snow on the cover itself could become dangerous weight, meaning you may need to go outside during the night and clear it. Nobody mentions that. You're all pretending bedtime means the work is finished. It does not. The older child looks toward the roof. Did people ever sleep under wagons? Yes, sometimes travellers may sleep inside wagons, beneath them, in tents, or directly beneath the open sky depending on weather. Family arrangements, available space, and personal preference. On pleasant nights, the wagon may be more storage room than bedroom. Tonight nobody is sleeping beneath it. You would have to dig for the privilege. You stretch your legs carefully. Your foot touches a box. You move sideways. Your shoulder meets a sack. You try another position. A child has occupied it. Excellent. Eventually you settle near the entrance, where the cold is sharper, but you can leave quickly if the animals need attention. The lantern throws moving shadows across the canvas. Each gust changes their shape. The youngest child watches them. Tell us something. You ask what kind of something. A story. Of course. Outside. A blizzard is burying the Oregon Trail. Inside, someone is sick, your clothes are damp, your food must be rationed, and your bed appears to contain a wooden corner specifically designed to press into your ribs. Naturally, it is story time. You begin quietly. Your voice blends with the wind. The children listen. The patient breathes. The canvas whispers above you, and while your words drift through that tiny, crowded darkness, another thought begins pressing gently at the edge of your mind. Nobody has eaten enough. Soon. Story or no story? You will have to open those dwindling stores and decide how much supper this stranded family can afford tonight. The story fades because hunger has a way of interrupting even the finest entertainment. One child asks when supper is coming. Another immediately announces that they are not hungry, which might sound helpful until you notice the hopeful glance toward the food chest. You ease yourself upright and reach past the bedding. Every movement requires negotiation. A knee passes over a flour sack. Your shoulder brushes a hanging shirt. Someone moves a boot before you sit on it. Outside, the little cooking fire is waiting. You would rather remain beneath the quilts. Unfortunately, supper has not developed the ability to cook itself. You pull on your damp outer layer, open the canvas flap, and receive a face full of cold air. The difference is startling. Inside the wagon, you had been thinking it was freezing. Outside politely corrects you. Snow spins through the lantern glow. The fire has survived, though barely, protected behind the shelter you made earlier. A few orange points pulse beneath dark fuel. You crouch beside them and coax the flame upward. Tonight's meal is not complicated. Complicated meals require ingredients, time, fuel, energy, and optimism. You currently possess limited quantities of all five. You inspect the stores. Flour is among the essentials carried by many emigrants heading west. Bacon, beans, coffee, sugar, salt, Rice, cornmeal, dried fruit, and other durable foods may also travel in the wagon. Though exact supplies vary considerably between families and companies, the journey demands enormous quantities of food, not gourmet food, food that survives, food that fills stomachs, food that can endure heat, dust, jolting wheels, damp mornings, river crossings, and the occasional unfortunate encounter with a leaking container. Your flour sack feels lighter than you would like. You know approximately what remains, but you check anyway. Nothing has multiplied. Rude. You choose flour for a simple preparation. Perhaps a rough bread or biscuit cooked quickly near the fire. There is a little bacon too, precious partly because its fat can flavour other foods. Beans would be useful, but dried beans demand cooking time. Cooking time demands fuel. Fuel is currently more valuable than culinary ambition, so the beans stay packed. You slice the bacon carefully, not generous pieces, sensible pieces. The knife moves through the meat while snow collects on your sleeve. You can almost hear a modern kitchen protesting. Where is the cutting board? Where is the refrigerator? Where is the sink? Where, indeed, is the entire building? You place the bacon into a pan. The first hiss is glorious. Fat begins to melt. The smell reaches the wagon almost immediately. A face appears at the opening. Then another. Apparently everyone has recovered their appetite. Is it ready? You look at the pan. No, a few seconds pass. Now you understand why 19th century parents sometimes appear unusually stern in photographs. You tell the children to close the flap and preserve what little warmth has gathered inside. The bacon continues sizzling. Food preservation during overland migration depends heavily on methods already familiar to households of the period. Meat can be salted or smoked, fruit can be dried, flour and grain travel well if kept dry. Families often begin with carefully planned stores, although consumption, spoilage, accidents, theft, and delays can upset calculations over a journey lasting months. And delays are precisely what trouble you tonight. You plan to move. You plan to reach another stopping place. You plan to gather fuel along the way. The storm has no interest in your plan. That is one of the quiet dangers of being stranded. Nothing dramatic needs to happen. You simply continue consuming resources while making no progress. You mix flour with what little liquid is necessary, working it into something that can be cooked without wasting precious fire. Your fingers become sticky, then numb, then sticky again. A 19th century cookbook might offer respectable instructions for biscuits. Your current method is closer to persuading flour to become dinner. You place portions near the heat. The bacon fat helps. The smell improves. You prepare something warm for the sick traveller as well. Perhaps thin gruel is possible, easy to swallow and gentle on a weak stomach. It is not exciting food, but excitement is not medically required. Coffee would be welcome. You consider it. Coffee is enormously popular among many overland travellers. Diaries and guidebooks repeatedly reveal how important familiar drinks and foods can become during exhausting journeys. A hot cup offers warmth, routine, and the small psychological comfort of doing something ordinary in an extraordinary place. But coffee requires water. Water requires melting snow, or using what you have stored, and heating water consumes fuel. You decide on a modest amount. This is not the evening for endless refills. There is an odd trail detail connected with coffee that would amuse you under better circumstances. Some travellers carry green coffee beans and roast them themselves, meaning the morning routine can involve roasting, grinding, and brewing before the day's journey even begins. Imagine complaining that your coffee machine takes 3 minutes. Your ancestors would like a word. You fill a vessel with clean snow. It looks like plenty. Then it melts. The result is insultingly small. You add more. Again it collapses into a shallow amount of water. Snow is mostly air. a fact that becomes personally irritating when you're crouched beside a fire trying to produce drinks for a family. The wind sends sparks sideways. You shield the fire behind you. The canvas snaps. The sick traveller coughs again. This time the coughing continues longer. You turn your head toward the wagon. Silence follows. Then a child murmurs something inside. You force yourself to finish cooking, food first, then the patient. You carry the pan toward the wagon and climb inside with extreme caution. Everyone shifts to make space. The smell of bacon transforms the mood immediately. You divide the portions. The children watch your hands. That makes rationing harder. There is enough for tonight. But you cannot know what tomorrow brings. If snow blocks the trail for several days, every meal must become smaller. If the animals cannot graze, their feed becomes another calculation. If illness worsens, this patient may need special attention and more water. You give the youngest child a portion, then the others, then the sick traveller, then yourself. Your share is smaller than it might have been. Nobody comments. That is one of those quiet decisions rarely celebrated in heroic paintings of westward migration. Much of family survival depends upon ordinary acts of distribution. Who eats first? Who receives the dry blanket? Who gets the easier place to sleep? Who saves food while claiming not to be hungry? Researchers continue to disagree about how evenly food shortages affected members of emigrant households, because surviving diaries often record supplies without telling us exactly how meals were divided among adults, children, hired workers, and sick travellers. Social expectations, age, labour, and family relationships could all shape who received what. Tonight you do not need an academic study to know the children should eat. The youngest devours the bread too quickly. You tell them to slow down. They slow down for approximately 2 bites. The bacon disappears. You distribute warm drink in small amounts. The patient turns away at first. You lean closer, just a little. The eyes open. For a moment they seem unfocused. Then the cup is accepted. 1 swallow. Another. A little gruel follows. Not much. Still. Something. You touch the forehead again. The skin feels hot. More clearly now. The warmth is not simply the contrast with your frozen fingers. You say nothing to the children instead. You talk about tomorrow. Perhaps the snow will stop. Perhaps the sun will appear. Perhaps you will dig out the wheels and move again. The older child asks whether there will be more bacon tomorrow. You pause. Maybe. That word has become useful. You collect the scraps carefully. Nothing edible is casually thrown away. Grease can be saved. Crumbs matter. Containers are closed immediately against moisture and pests. Though any mouse ambitious enough to reach this wagon tonight deserves professional respect, your supper has taken perhaps a fraction of the supplies you carry. Yet you feel each missing handful. Emigrant guidebooks often recommend specific quantities of provisions for the journey. But recommendations vary, and actual travellers adapt constantly. Some begin overloaded and discard food or equipment. Others discover too late that they have underestimated distance, delays, or appetite. A hungry adult walking 15 or 20 miles can eat impressively. Children grow hungry too. Sickness complicates everything, and weather turns arithmetic into anxiety. You pack the flour securely. The beans remain untouched. The remaining bacon is wrapped. Coffee is closed away. You glance toward the fuel supply. Smaller. Everything tonight seems smaller. The food, the wood, the lantern oil, the space inside the wagon. Only the storm appears to be growing. You extinguish what cannot safely be left burning and preserve the remaining fuel as carefully as possible. Then you settle back beneath the canvas. The children are warmer now. Food has softened their voices. One is already yawning. Another has found a crumb and is examining it as if considering whether it deserves preservation. You tell them to eat it. Problem solved. The sick traveller shifts beneath the quilts. A low sound escapes with the movement. You lean over. The breathing is faster than before. You offer water again. A little is taken. The cup trembles against weak fingers, so you hold it steady. Outside, snow continues brushing the wagon. Inside, the smell of supper slowly fades beneath damp wool and warm breath. The children curl closer together. Their stomachs are not full. Exactly. But they are no longer empty. For tonight, that must be enough. You tuck the remaining food away and look at the small faces disappearing beneath blankets. They need warmth now more than supper. They need reassurance more than explanations. And while the fevered traveller breathes unevenly beside you, your attention turns toward the children whose shivering has not completely stopped. You pull the quilts higher around the children and discover, as parents have discovered for generations, that a blanket can cover either shoulders or feet perfectly well. But apparently not both at the same time. The youngest child curls into a ball. That helps. Small bodies naturally seek warmth by drawing inward. Knees tucked toward the chest, hands hidden beneath arms. You encourage the older children to lie close together rather than spreading across the wagon bed. Nobody objects. Personal space has officially been suspended until spring. You place another folded cloth beneath the youngest child's feet. The stockings are damp despite your efforts, so you replace them with the driest pair you can find. They are not truly dry. Nothing inside the wagon seems truly dry anymore. But they are better. Better is enough. You rub the child's feet gently through the cloth, trying to restore warmth without being rough. The toes feel cold. You keep rubbing. Outside, the wind strikes the wagon broadside for several seconds, then changes slightly and rushes around the rear. The canvas pulls tight above you. One child looks toward the roof, another pretends not to. Children are very good at noticing what adults hope they have missed. You keep your voice quiet, closer together. They shuffle beneath the quilts. An elbow finds someone's ribs. A complaint follows, then another. Apparently the immediate danger of freezing has not eliminated sibling politics. You're on my blanket. I am not. You are. Move your leg. That is my leg. You close your eyes for one peaceful second. Thousands of miles from where this family began, trapped in a blizzard on the Oregon Trail with a sick traveller beside you. You're mediating a dispute about approximately 4 inches of quilt. Some things transcend history. You redistribute the bedding. One child receives the edge of a wool blanket. Another gets more of the quilt. The youngest is placed between warmer bodies. The argument ends, for now. Children make up a significant part of many emigrant parties heading west during the Great Migrations of the 19th century. Families bring infants, toddlers, older children, and teenagers across distances that challenge even healthy adults. Young travelers walk, gather fuel, watch livestock, carry water, help prepare meals, and perform whatever tasks match their age and strength. This is not a journey populated only by rugged men staring nobly at mountains. Much of the trail is family life stretched across 2,000 miles. That means chores, it means crying, it means games, it means lost shoes, it means someone asking whether you're there yet long before anyone has invented the automobile. The older child is still awake. Will the snow get inside? A little might. Will it cover us? No. There is that useful answer again. You hope it remains true. Snow is beginning to accumulate against the wagon, and although the cover is curved enough to shed some of it, wind can force powder into seams and openings. You reach upward and press lightly against the canvas. Cold immediately passes through the fabric. The barrier between your family and the storm is astonishingly thin. You can feel the movement of the wind through it. You sit back down. The youngest child's shivering has eased. Good. You check the hands next. Small fingers are tucked beneath the quilt now, warmer than before. You remind everyone to keep heads covered. Nightcaps and other head coverings are ordinary parts of 19th century sleep clothing, though tonight fashion has nothing to do with it. Any dry cloth that helps retain warmth is welcome. One child has wrapped a scarf so enthusiastically that only the nose remains visible. You adjust it. Breathing is still fashionable. A peculiar feature of trail childhood is how quickly play can attach itself to hardship. Accounts from emigrant families mention children making games from camps, collecting unusual stones, watching wildlife, singing, racing, and finding entertainment in landscapes that adults experience primarily as work. Even discarded objects along the trail can become treasures. A broken piece of household china might be picked up and examined. A strange animal bone becomes a discovery. A bit of coloured cloth becomes a toy. Tonight there is not much to collect except snow, and you would prefer that the children stop collecting that. Still. The youngest begins drawing shapes in the condensation, gathering on a metal cup. A circle. Then another. What is that A face? The face has 3 eyes. You decide not to criticise frontier art. The sick traveller coughs beside you. Everyone goes quiet. The coughing comes in several rough bursts, followed by a long breath. The older child turns toward you. Are they going to be all right? There are questions adults dislike because children ask them plainly. You cannot promise what you do not know. So you say the traveller needs rest and warmth, and that you are taking care of them. The child nods. It is enough for the moment. You place a hand against the patient's blanket, checking that it has not slipped. Then you return to the children. Cold is not the only threat to them. Fear exhausts people too. A frightened child may cry, refuse food, struggle to sleep, or become unusually quiet. You have no textbook explaining childhood stress during overland migration, but you know these children. You know who talks when afraid. You know who goes silent. You know who suddenly needs to ask 17 questions about oxen. Tonight. The youngest wants a story again, not the one from before, a different one. You begin describing home, not the journey. Home. You talk about a kitchen on a cold morning, a door opening, the smell of bread, sunlight across a floor. Perhaps you describe grandparents, cousins, neighbours, or a familiar road. You don't know whether returning is possible. That does not matter. Memory itself provides shelter. Researchers have interpreted children's experiences on the overland trails in different ways, partly because children leave fewer written records than adults. Some later memoirs describe the journey as a grand adventure, while diaries written by parents reveal illness, accidents, hunger, and constant anxiety. How much young travellers understood the dangers around them remains difficult to measure, and memories recorded decades later may soften or reshape frightening experiences. Your children understand enough tonight. They know the wagon has stopped. They know someone is sick. They know the wind sounds wrong, but they also know you are here. So you keep talking. Your voice slows. The story becomes less about any particular memory and more about familiar details. A warm stove, a table, rain against a real roof, fresh milk, clean sheets. At the mention of clean sheets. The older child makes a sceptical noise. You smile. Yes, clean sheets. Really clean. Very clean. This apparently qualifies as fantasy. You continue until breathing around you begins to change. One child drifts towards sleep, then another. The youngest fights it. Eyes close, eyes open, eyes close again. You gently move a strand of hair away from the child's forehead. Sleep finally wins. For a while. You simply watch. The lantern is turned low now, giving barely enough light to see faces. Shadows from hanging clothes move across the canvas. Every breath becomes a faint cloud near the coldest gaps. The children's bodies create warmth together beneath the layered bedding. That matters. Before modern insulated sleeping bags and synthetic fabrics, travellers rely on wool blankets, quilts, clothing, shared body heat, and whatever shelter they can arrange. Wool is particularly valuable because it retains useful insulating properties even when somewhat damp. Though wet wool is heavy and uncomfortable, tonight you're grateful for every scrap of it. You shift the bedding around the edges, trying to block drafts. A spare garment goes near the youngest child's feet. A folded blanket fills a gap beside the wagon wall. A sack is moved to create a barrier near the entrance. Your shelter becomes a nest assembled from household clutter. The wind continues. You hear something strike the canvas outside. A small branch, perhaps, or hardened snow. You wait. Nothing follows. The oxen are quiet. That is both reassuring and concerning. You listen for the bell. Nothing. You hold still. There. Clink. Faint. You relax slightly. The older child opens one eye. Are you sleeping soon? This is a lie, but a kind one. The eye closes again. You remain upright. There is no chance of proper sleep yet. The children may be warmer, but you will need to check them through the night. Wet clothing must be watched. Snow may need clearing. The animals may need attention. And beside you, the sick traveller's breathing is becoming impossible to ignore. You turn toward the patient. The cheeks are flushed more deeply now. A hand lies outside the quilt. You take it. The skin is hot, not warm, hot. The contrast with the cold wagon makes the fever seem almost unnatural, as though the storm has placed winter outside the body and summer within it. The patient opens their eyes. Water. You reach immediately for the cup. The children sleep behind you, tucked close beneath wool and quilts, their quarrels temporarily forgotten. Now the night belongs to the fever. You lift the cup carefully and support the sick traveller's head with your other hand. The movement wakes nobody. At least, you think it wakes nobody. In a wagon this crowded, children develop a remarkable ability to appear asleep while listening to absolutely everything. The patient drinks, one swallow, then another. The third brings a cough, so you lower the cup and wait. Breathing comes quickly afterward, shallow and uncomfortable. You hold the person upright until it settles, feeling heat through the clothing. The fever is unmistakable now. You have no thermometer, even if you did. Knowing the exact number would not magically produce a physician from the snow, so you use the tools available to you. Your hand, your eyes, your ears, questions. Does the head hurt? A nod. Any pain in the chest? Another small nod. Chills. Earlier. You ask about the stomach. No answer at first, then a faint shake of the head. You listen to the cough. Dry at moments, deeper at others. Useful information. Perhaps. But you're not a doctor. That distinction matters. On the overland trails, professional medical care can be difficult or impossible to reach. Some wagon companies include physicians, and travellers occasionally encounter doctors among other emigrants, at military posts or in settlements. Yet many families depend heavily on household knowledge and whatever medicines they have packed. And household medicine in 1804 Edison can be a complicated business. Some remedies are sensible. Rest, warmth, water, simple food, cleaning wounds. Others are less appealing to modern ears. Patent medicines and household preparations may contain alcohol, opium compounds, mercury, or other substances whose risks are poorly understood. You look toward the medicine bottle near the bedding. It suddenly seems less reassuring. You know what you brought. You know what someone back home told you it was good for. You may even have used it before. But sickness on the trail makes every decision heavier because there is no easy second opinion. You place the cup down. The patient whispers that they are cold. That seems absurd when the skin feels so hot. But fever often comes with chills. You adjust the quilt. Not too much. You do not want to smother the patient beneath every blanket in the wagon simply because they feel cold. A cloth is dampened with a little water and placed against the forehead. Water is precious, yet comfort matters too. The patient closes their eyes. You sit beside them and watch. Outside, the wind presses against the canvas. Inside, the children breathe in a soft, uneven chorus for several minutes. Nothing changes. Then the sick traveller begins shivering. You place a hand on the shoulder. The shivering passes. You offer another sip. This one stays down. Good. You take victories in very small portions tonight. One curious feature of 19th century home medicine is the enormous confidence placed in certain treatments that modern medicine has largely abandoned. Calomel, a mercury compound, is widely used for various illnesses during the period. It can act as a powerful purgative, and repeated doses may cause mercury poisoning. Imagine being desperately ill and discovering that your medicine has decided to create several additional problems. Not ideal. Other remedies involve mustard plasters, herbal preparations, quinine for certain fevers, laudanum for pain or diarrhea, and various tonics. Families carry medicines according to experience, advice, guidebooks, and local custom. Some are useful, some are ineffective, some are dangerous, and often the person administering them has no reliable way to know which category applies. You choose caution. The patient needs fluids, rest, warmth without overheating, observation. You can manage those. You check the pulse at the wrist, fast, or perhaps your own anxiety makes it seem fast. You count again, still fast. The youngest child stirs beneath the quilt. You stop counting and wait. The child rolls closer to a sibling and settles. Good. You turn back. Disease is one of the defining realities of 19th century overland migration. Cholera is especially notorious during the Great Migration years. Spreading through contaminated water and crowded travel corridors, dysentery and other intestinal illnesses also threaten emigrants, while respiratory infections, measles, accidents, childbirth complications, and chronic conditions continue regardless of geography. The trail does not create every illness. It simply removes many of the comforts and resources that make illness easier to survive. A fever at home might mean a bed in a quiet room. Here it means a bed beside flour sacks while a blizzard tries to dismantle your roof. The patient opens their eyes again. Where are we? You answer with the nearest landmark you remember. There is a pause. Still, yes. The eyes close. That single word carries disappointment. Still here. Still stranded. Still snowing. You dip the cloth again. You have to ration even this small amount of water. More can be made from snow. But melting snow consumes fuel, and eating snow directly can lower body temperature. Everything connects to something else. Water costs fuel, warmth costs fuel, food costs fuel, moving requires animals, animals require feed, the sick require rest, rest requires staying, staying consumes food. You could draw the entire problem as a circle, a very cold circle. Debate continues among historians of medicine over how much emigrant mortality should be attributed to limited medical knowledge versus the harsh conditions surrounding treatment. Even a competent 19th century physician faces enormous obstacles on the trail. Clean water may be scarce, patients are exhausted, nutrition can be poor, sanitation is difficult, medicines are limited. Travel itself places constant strain on recovery. A modern doctor transported into your wagon tonight would certainly know more. They would also probably ask where the hospital is. You could point vaguely into the blizzard. Very helpful. The patient coughs again. This time you hear congestion. You lean closer, listening to the breathing after the cough ends. There is a faint roughness. You wonder about pneumonia. Though the word itself carries frightening associations, 19th century physicians recognize inflammation of the lungs, but effective antibiotics are still many decades away. That knowledge would not comfort you. Fortunately, you do not possess knowledge of future antibiotics. You simply know that chest illness can become serious. You encourage another drink. The patient refuses. You wait, then offer again. A little is accepted. Patience becomes treatment. You wipe the face, adjust the pillow, check the blanket, listen, wait, repeat. The older child suddenly speaks from the darkness. Are they very sick, so much for sleeping? You turn. 2 eyes are visible above the quilt. They have a fever. Will it go away? I hope so. This answer feels more honest than another firm no. The child sits up slightly. Can I help you consider sending them back to sleep? Then you remember how frightened helplessness feels. Hold this. You give the child the cloth. They fold it carefully. Too carefully. Then place it on the patient's forehead. The sick traveller opens their eyes and gives the faintest smile. The child smiles back. There. Something useful. You tell the child that nursing is often made of small things. Keeping water nearby, keeping bedding comfortable, watching, listening, noticing changes. The child nods with great seriousness. For a few minutes, you share the work, then you send the young helper back beneath the quilt. Wake me if you need me. You almost laugh. You're sitting 3 feet away. Still, you promise. The wagon darkens further as the lantern burns lower. You could add more oil, but there is no need yet. Your eyes have adjusted. You know where everyone lies. You know the location of the cup, the bottle, the blankets, the flap. Your hands can find them without much light. The fevered traveller finally seems to drift into deeper sleep. Breathing remains rough but steadier. You do not know whether that is improvement. You choose to accept it as temporary peace. Your back aches from sitting. Your legs are cramped. You shift slowly, placing yourself near enough to touch the patient without rising. Then you listen, not only to the sick traveller, to everything, the children, the canvas, the wind, the wooden frame, the animals outside. The sounds form a strange nighttime language, and you are learning which ones belong. A cough belongs, a creak belongs, the soft tap of rope belongs, the faint livestock bell belongs. Then something changes. The wind rises sharply. Canvas snaps above you with a crack loud enough to wake the youngest child. A second gust follows. The wagon rocks. Snow rusps across the cover like handfuls of dry sand. The patient stirs. The children pull closer. You look upward into the darkness. The fever will need watching until morning, but the storm has decided it would also like your attention, and midnight is only beginning. The next gust arrives before the wagon has finished trembling from the last one. Canvas snaps overhead. A rope taps rapidly against one of the wooden bows. The youngest child makes a small sound beneath the quilt, not quite a cry, and you place your hand gently on the bundled shoulder. It is only the wind, a magnificent phrase. As though the wind is not currently throwing an entire winter landscape against your shelter, you remain seated for several breaths, listening to the structure around you. The wagon creaks whenever pressure shifts across the cover. Wood complains in little groans. Leather fittings move. Somewhere near the front, a metal object knocks twice and falls silent. Nothing sounds broken. Not yet. The children settle again. The sick traveller does not fully wake, though the breathing remains rough. You reach toward the canvas above your head. It bends inward slightly beneath your fingers. Snow. Some has begun collecting rather than sliding away. You push upward. A soft weight shifts across the roof and slips down one side with a rushing whisper. The sound wakes the older child. What was that snow coming off? Was there a lot? No. This is technically true according to your newly established standards. You listen again. The storm has intensified. Wind across the plains can be relentless because there may be little terrain or vegetation to interrupt it. Emigrants repeatedly describe severe weather as one of the great uncertainties of overland travel. Thunderstorms, hail, heavy rain, sudden cold, intense heat, and snow can transform familiar ground in a matter of hours. Weather does not need to destroy a wagon to threaten a family. It only needs to stop progress. Then time begins doing the damage. Food disappears. Animals weaken. Illness worsens. People become tired. You glance toward the food stores in the darkness. Tomorrow's problem. Tonight you need to keep the roof above you. Another gust hits. The canvas rises between the boughs and snaps back. The noise is much louder inside than outside. Like sleeping inside a drum someone has decided to carry through a hurricane. You pull the blanket around your shoulders and wait. Sleep seems unlikely. The children may manage it because children can sleep through circumstances that would make an adult begin writing a will. One of them already is. You hear a soft snore. You look toward the sound. There it is again. A tiny, peaceful snore beneath a quilt while the Oregon Trail disappears beneath snow. Impressive. You shift closer to the entrance. Cold air finds a gap and slides across your hand. You tuck a folded cloth more firmly against it. The draft weakens. Not gone, weakened. You have become grateful for reductions. The wind continues in waves, strong, stronger, then quieter. Each calm moment tricks you into thinking the storm might be easing. Then another blast arrives and reminds you not to become emotionally attached to optimism. You hear the oxen outside, a low sound, then movement. You freeze. Something scrapes near the wagon, perhaps a hoof, perhaps harness, perhaps an animal shifting against its tether. You listen for alarm. Nothing. A bell rings once, clink, then twice. The sound is close enough. You decide not to go outside yet. That decision produces immediate guilt. What if a rope is tangled? What if an animal is down? What if something has broken? You wait another moment. A slow chewing sound reaches you faintly. Good. An animal calm enough to chew is providing you with an excellent medical report. You remain inside. One unusual detail of emigrant camps is how thoroughly travellers learn the voices of livestock. Oxen, cattle, horses, and mules are not background scenery. Their sounds can tell experienced owners whether animals are restless, frightened, hungry, separated, or simply being animals at an inconvenient hour. You begin recognizing individuals by bells, behavior, markings, and habits. One ox may be steady, another may pull badly, one may wander whenever given the opportunity. There is always one. Apparently even cattle produce difficult co-workers. A stronger gust makes the lantern flame flutter. You look toward it immediately. The flame steadies. Fire inside the wagon remains a concern, so the lantern is positioned carefully and kept low. You resist the temptation to brighten it. Darkness is inconvenient, but darkness does not ignite bedding. The patient moves. You reach over. The fever is still there. You offer water. No response. You touch the shoulder. Eyes open briefly. A few sips are taken, then sleep returns. You settle back. The hours become difficult to measure. You have no glowing clock beside your bed. Perhaps you own a watch. Perhaps not. But checking it repeatedly would accomplish very little. Midnight on the trail is not defined by numbers tonight. It is defined by tasks. Check the children. Listen to the patient. Listen to the animals. Push snow from the cover. Adjust the blanket. Wait, then begin again. Accounts from emigrant diaries often mention nights broken by livestock trouble. Storms, illness, guard duty, crying children, or simple discomfort. Sleep during overland travel can be irregular even in good conditions. Camp routines may require people to rise before dawn, prepare breakfast, gather animals, load equipment, and begin moving while temperatures are manageable. Tonight there will be no cheerful dawn departure. Still, your body does not know that. Fatigue presses against you. Your head dips. You wake instantly when your chin touches your chest. How long? A few seconds, several minutes. The wind sounds unchanged. Everyone is still here. You reposition yourself and try to stay alert. Historical interpretation becomes particularly uncertain when scholars examine how emigrants experience fear during severe weather. Diaries sometimes describe storms with astonishing calm, recording damaged tents or soaked bedding in the same tone used for mileage and meals. Some researchers see this as evidence of cultural expectations encouraging restraint, while others suggest that exhausted travellers simply lack time to write elaborate emotional accounts. You wonder what you would write about tonight. Snowed considerably, that might be all, a whole night of cold, fever, fear, and listening reduced to 2 words, snowed considerably. You almost smile. The canvas suddenly presses downward again. More weight this time. You push, it barely moves. You press harder with both hands. Snow shifts overhead and slides off with a heavy rush. The wagon shakes. A child wakes. What are you doing, keeping the snow off? While you hesitate. So we have less snow. Excellent explanation. The child accepts it anyway. You lie down as far as space permits. The wooden wagon bed is unforgiving. A folded blanket beneath your hip helps slightly. Your shoulder rests against a sack. Your feet are near the entrance. You pull the remaining blanket over yourself. Perhaps now you can sleep. You close your eyes. The wind becomes louder without sight. You hear each separate element. Canvas fluttering, rope tapping, wood creaking, snow hissing, the patient's breathing, a child's sleepy murmur, the faint bell outside. You begin counting breaths. 1, 2, 3, somewhere around 20. Your thoughts drift. You imagine a real bed, a mattress, a roof made of something more substantial than fabric, walls, the absurd luxury of walls. You picture lying in darkness without wondering whether the ceiling is accumulating snow. Your body begins to soften. Then a violent crack comes from above. Your eyes open. Everyone moves. The wagon rocks once. The older child sits upright. What broke you? Listen. Nothing follows. You reach upward and feel along the nearest bough. Still firm. Perhaps the canvas snapped sharply. Perhaps a rope struck wood. Perhaps ice shifted. You cannot know without checking. The wind howls around the wagon. You stare toward the rear flap. Going outside means surrendering the small amount of warmth you've gathered. Staying inside means trusting a sound you cannot identify. You pull on your boots. They are stiff and miserably cold. Your coat follows. The older child watches. Are you going out? Just for a moment, you secure the blanket around the child before opening the flap. Snow blows immediately into the wagon. You slip through and close it behind you. Darkness surrounds the lantern glow. The wagon looks strangely small from outside. You inspect the cover. The bows seem intact. One rope has loosened and is striking the frame. There is your mysterious catastrophe. A rope. You tighten it with aching fingers. Then you clear snow from the canvas, pushing and brushing until the cover rises cleanly again. You check the animals. They stand close together, heads low, alive and miserable. Good enough. You return to the wagon. Inside feels almost warm now. That is concerning evidence of how cold outside has become. You remove the snow from your clothing and crawl beneath the blanket. The children settle. The patient sleeps. The rope no longer taps. For the first time in hours, one irritating sound is gone, and into that tiny absence, Exhaustion finally enters. Your eyes close. The wind continues working against the canvas, but your mind begins letting it drift farther away. You sleep in fragments, minutes perhaps, then longer, until somewhere beyond the wagon, beneath darkness and blowing snow, one of the animals makes a sound that pulls you sharply back toward waking. The sound comes again, low, drawn out, unhappy. You open your eyes and remain completely still beneath the blanket, listening through the canvas. One of the oxen. There's another heavy movement outside, followed by the faint jingle of a bell and a dull scraping near the wagon. You wait for the familiar rhythm of chewing. Nothing. The youngest child sleeps with one hand curled beside their face. The older children remain motionless. The sick traveller breathes roughly but steadily. You could ignore the sound. You could tell yourself the animals are merely uncomfortable. You could remain beneath the blanket where your feet have finally stopped aching. Then the ox bell rings several times in quick succession. You sit up, of course, because apparently the oxen have scheduled an appointment. You pull on your coat again. It is damp and cold enough to feel like punishment. Your boots are worse. The leather is stiffened, and forcing your feet inside them takes several uncomfortable seconds. You lift the rear flap just enough to squeeze through. Snow immediately strikes your face. The storm has not ended, but something about it feels different. The flakes are smaller now, harder, driven almost horizontally through the darkness. You raise the lantern. The wagon appears behind you as a pale shape surrounded by swirling white. The animals are barely visible. You move toward them. Easy. Your voice disappears into the wind. One ox is standing normally, head lowered. Another has turned awkwardly. Its tether has twisted around a length of gear near the wagon, and each attempt to move tightens the problem. There is the scraping sound. You approach slowly. A frightened ox is not an object you want moving suddenly in darkness. An adult animal can weigh well over 1,000 pounds. You may love it, depend upon it, name it, speak kindly to it, and still prefer that it not step on your foot. You hold the lantern where the animal can see you. Easy. The ox exhales. Warm breath becomes a cloud. You reach for the tangled line. Your gloves make the knot difficult. You remove one glove. Instant regret. The rope feels hard and wet beneath your fingers. You work it loose. The animal shifts. You stop. Wait. Then continue. For many emigrants, oxen are the practical engines of Western migration. They pull wagons day after day, often at a walking pace of only a few miles an hour, compared with horses or mules. Oxen are generally less expensive and can survive on poorer forage, though they are certainly not immune to exhaustion, injury, hunger, disease, or bad weather. A family that loses its team can lose its mobility. That makes every animal outside this wagon part of the family's survival. You free the rope. The ox steps away. Immediately, the tension disappears from its posture. Good. You replace your glove and flex your fingers. The cold has already bitten deeply into them. Now you inspect the rest of the animals. Snow lies along their backs. They have turned naturally away from the strongest wind where possible, presenting their hindquarters toward it and keeping their heads lower. You run your hand over one animal's shoulder. The hair is cold and damp near the surface. Beneath it, there is still warmth. You check legs and hooves as well as you can in the darkness. No obvious injury, no blood, no animal lying helpless in the snow. A remarkably successful inspection by tonight's standards. The team needs feed. You knew this before coming outside, and you resent knowing it now. The grass is buried. Even if the snow is not especially deep everywhere, grazing in darkness during a storm would waste energy and risk losing the animals. So you return to the protected feed. Every portion matters. You carry enough to keep them occupied and provide energy, but you cannot feed as generously as you would like. The oxen begin eating. That sound returns. Slow chewing. You had no idea chewing could be reassuring. You stand beside them for a while, lantern low, watching their jaws move. Trail animals sometimes acquire wonderfully ordinary names. Surviving accounts mention teams with names reflecting colours, personalities, jokes, or familiar human names. An ox might be called Buck, Berry, Broad, Lion, or something equally straightforward. There is something charming about crossing a continent behind an animal named Berry. Less charming when Berry refuses to cross a river. You brush snow from the nearest animal. It does almost nothing. The storm replaces it immediately. Still, your hand remains there for a moment, warm hide beneath winter hair, a living creature breathing beside you. These animals have walked the same miles you have, but while you complain about your feet, they pull the house. You feel slightly guilty, not enough to offer them your blanket, but slightly. The relationship between emigrants and draft animals is more complicated than the familiar heroic pictures suggest. Researchers disagree about how carefully ordinary travellers managed livestock over the full journey. Guidebooks and experienced emigrants repeatedly warn against overworking teams, yet diaries also describe exhausted animals, shortages of forage, abandoned livestock, and desperate efforts to keep wagons moving. Were failures mostly caused by inexperience, bad planning, extreme conditions, simple necessity? Probably some combination, varying from family to family tonight. You understand how quickly good intentions can meet bad circumstances. You want the animals rested. You also want them ready to pull tomorrow. You want to conserve feed. You also need them fed. You want to shelter them. You have one wagon and no barn. Welcome to frontier logistics. The bell rings softly as one ox moves. You inspect the fastening, secure. The ropes are not so tight that the animals cannot shift, but not loose enough for them to wander easily into the storm. You look beyond the lantern light. Nothing. No stars. No moon. No distant fire. The landscape is entirely absent. You could walk 50 paces from the wagon and become dangerously disoriented. That thought keeps you close. Stories of emigrants becoming separated from camps are not merely dramatic inventions. Livestock wander. People go searching. Fog, darkness, storms, unfamiliar terrain, and distance can turn a short errand into a serious problem. You make a rule for yourself. You do not go beyond sight of the wagon. Not tonight. One ox suddenly lifts its head. You stop. The animal stares into the darkness. You follow its gaze. Nothing appears. The ox keeps staring. Your imagination becomes extremely efficient. Wolf traveller, loose animal. Something worse. The ox snorts, then returns to eating. Thank you for that. You stand there feeling foolish. Wildlife does concern emigrants, but popular storytelling often exaggerates some dangers while overlooking ordinary ones. Wolves may approach camps, especially where food waste or dead animals are present. Yet a healthy adult traveller is generally in more danger from disease, accidents, river crossings, weather, and livestock than from dramatic attacks by predators. Even so, you prefer that anything with teeth remain elsewhere. The animals finish most of the feed. You gather what should not be wasted. Your hands are aching again. The lantern flame struggles each time the wind reaches it. You turn toward the wagon before going inside. You check the wheels. Snow has drifted against them. One side is buried several inches higher than before. You kick gently at the accumulation. Dense. Tomorrow. If the storm stops, you will have work to do. A lot of work. You look at the oxen again. They will need strength for it. You move the team as close to the wagon's sheltered side as safely possible. The wagon breaks part of the wind. Though not much, one animal presses near another. There is wisdom in that. Warm bodies together. The same solution you used with the children. You check the troublesome tether one final time. No twist, no snag. You touch the ox on the neck. Stay. A ridiculous instruction. Where exactly would you like it to go still? Saying it feels appropriate. You return to the wagon. The flap opens. Warm breath, damp wool, and darkness greet you. The older child is awake. Were they all right? Yes. What happened? One got tangled. Which one you tell them? There is a sleepy pause. Did you fix it? Yes. The child settles back beneath the quilt, trust restored with one word. You remove your coat carefully and shake loose snow near the entrance. Your gloves are damp. Your fingers are red and painful as warmth returns. The patient stirs. You check the fever. Still hot. You offer water. A little is taken, then you lie down again. Outside. The ox bell rings once. Clink. You know what it means now. Movement. Life. Your team is still there. The children are still here. The patient is still breathing. The wagon is still standing for the moment. Your entire world remains intact. You close your eyes. The storm continues. But exhaustion is stronger. Sleep finally comes without asking permission. And when you wake again, there is light behind the canvas. Not sunlight, just a pale grey glow. You lift your head, listen to the strangely muted morning, and realize the wind has weakened. Then you open the flap. The world outside is white. The wheels are buried. The trail is gone. And dawn, rather rudely, has solved absolutely nothing. You keep one hand on the canvas flap and stare for several seconds. Nobody behind you speaks. The world has been erased. Yesterday there was grass, a trail, shallow ruts, scattered brush, perhaps distant hills, and the comforting evidence that other people had passed this way before you. Now there is white ground beneath a white sky, with no obvious boundary between them. Snow has smoothed everything. The wagon wheels are buried almost to their hubs on the windward side. A drift has formed along the lower edge of the wagon, curling around the wheels and rising toward the bed. The oxen stand nearby, pale shapes against the morning. One turns its head, the bell sounds clink. Good morning to you too. You close the flap quickly before the cold enters any farther. The children are waking. The youngest has hair pointing in several directions and the confused expression of someone who expected morning to improve things automatically. Are we going? You look toward the canvas. Not yet. How much snow is there? A lot. The older child sits up. How much is a lot? You consider inventing a measurement instead. You tell everyone to remain beneath the blankets while you check outside properly. The sick traveller is awake now too. The fever has not disappeared. You touch the forehead. Still hot. Though perhaps no worse than during the night. Perhaps. The patient asks whether the storm is over. The wind is quieter. That is not the same answer. Everyone knows it. You offer water. Then pull on yesterday's clothes. They are cold. Your stockings feel damp. Your coat smells of smoke and wet wool. Your boots have stiffened during the night, and getting them onto your feet becomes an unexpectedly personal argument. Eventually, the boots surrender. You step outside. The first thing you notice is silence. Not complete silence. The oxen breathe. Canvas moves gently. Snow crunches beneath your boots. But after hours of roaring wind, the morning feels strangely padded. Fresh snow absorbs sound. The entire landscape seems wrapped in cloth. You walk around the wagon, slowly. The snow reaches well or above your ankles in some places and much higher where it has drifted. The trail beneath it is invisible. This matters more than simple inconvenience. The Oregon Trail is not one single narrow road paved neatly across the continent. It is a broad migration corridor containing multiple tracks, cut-offs, crossings, camps, and alternative routes. Wagons often spread across open ground where terrain allows, creating parallel ruts rather than one permanent lane. In good weather, following the general route can be straightforward. In snow, familiar signs vanish. You look for wheel ruts. Nothing. You search for tracks from yesterday. Nothing. The storm has removed your recent past. You turn slowly, trying to remember the direction of travel. You know where you came from, at least. You think you do. The wagon was repositioned last night. That complicates matters. The wind shifted. That complicates matters too. There may be landmarks beyond the grey distance, but low cloud hides them. You're not lost exactly. You're merely unable to see the route. A wonderfully comforting distinction. You inspect the wheels. Snow is packed tightly around the lower portions. Beneath that, the ground may be frozen, muddy, or both depending on temperature and soil. You kick at one drift. The surface collapses. Below it, denser snow clings near the wheel. This wagon is not moving without work. The children emerge one at a time, wrapped in blankets and coats. You immediately send the youngest back, but I want to see. You can see from the wagon. I can't see anything. Precisely. The child disappears with the deeply offended dignity of someone denied access to a frozen wasteland. The older child remains beside you. They stare across the snow. Where is the road under there? Where you point? The child looks. You could have pointed anywhere. A surprisingly persistent image in popular culture shows emigrants following neat wheel tracks westward like traffic on a highway. In reality, wagon routes can spread widely, especially across open plains. Deep ruts become more visible in difficult terrain where wagons funnel through narrow passages or descend the same slopes. Elsewhere, one wagon may travel beside another simply to avoid dust. Imagine being so tired of swallowing the previous wagon's dirt that you create your own road. Very reasonable this morning, however, you would happily accept a dusty rut. You walk farther from the wagon, but not far. The rule from last night still applies. Stay within sight. The snow is uneven. Some patches are shallow where wind stripped the ground. Others have accumulated into deeper drifts. You probe ahead with a stick. The older child copies you. Soon the child is poking every patch of snow with enormous concentration. At least someone is enjoying the survey. You stop and look toward the sky. The cloud cover is beginning to brighten. No blue, no sun. But perhaps the storm is passing. You breathe through your nose. The air is painfully cold. Your breath clouds in front of you. Behind the wagon. The animals shift impatiently. They need food. The family needs breakfast. The patient needs attention. The wagon needs digging out. And you need information. How deep is the snow farther ahead? Is the trail passable? Are other travellers nearby? Has anyone else been stranded? Could another wagon company be only a mile away? Hidden behind the white horizon? You do not know. Historical records make clear that weather delays can disrupt overland schedules significantly. Timing matters because emigrants generally aim to cross difficult mountain regions before severe winter conditions arrive. Parties leaving too late, travelling too slowly, or suffering repeated delays can face increasingly dangerous weather as the season advances. The year 1849 brings especially heavy westward traffic because of the California gold rush, adding new travellers to routes already used by Oregon-bound emigrants. More travellers can mean more information and assistance. It can also mean damaged grazing, crowded camps, contaminated water, and competition for supplies. None of that helps when nobody's visible. You return toward the wagon. The patient coughs inside. The sound carries clearly through the quiet morning. You climb in. The air is stale and damp. Condensation has formed in places along the interior. Bedding feels clammy near the edges. The children are hungry again. Naturally. You distribute small portions while preparing something warm. Breakfast is modest. There is no point pretending otherwise. The flour supply is lower. Fuel is lower. Feed for the animals is lower. You make warm liquid for the patient and encourage several sips. The patient asks how soon you will leave. You glance toward the entrance. I don't know. There. The truth. It feels heavier than the snow. Academic discussion remains divided over how accurately emigrants could predict travel times before departure. Guidebooks, letters, newspaper reports, and advice from experienced travellers provided estimates. But actual progress depended upon animals, weather, river levels, illness, mechanical failures, route choices, and the size and organisation of a party. A journey that looked manageable on paper could change quickly. Your little family's now living inside that uncertainty. After breakfast, you shake bedding and rearrange the interior. The children help. One discovers that a blanket edge near the wagon wall has partially frozen. They hold it up. It is stiff. You touch it. It is indeed. Can I break it? No. Disappointment. Apparently frozen household textiles have entertainment potential. You move the blanket nearer the centre where body heat may soften it. Then you inspect the boots, gloves, ropes, tools, and harness. Everything feels harder this morning. Leather has stiffened. Metal bites the fingers. Wood carries a thin crust of frost. Even simple objects seem offended by the temperature. You step outside again with a tool and begin clearing around one wheel. The older child joins you. Snow moves easily at first. Then you reach the packed layer. You scrape, push, lift, throw. The child does the same with a smaller board. Soon there is a shallow trench beside the wheel. You stand upright. Your back already aches. You have cleared perhaps 1/4 of one wheel, 4 wheels, packed snow beneath the wagon, drifts ahead, harness to prepare, animals to feed, and no guarantee that moving today is wise. You look across the white country. The cloud shifts slightly. For one brief moment, a darker shape appears in the distance. A ridge, perhaps, or trees. Then grey swallows it again. You try to place it in memory. Was that landmark there yesterday? Which side of the trail was it on? You cannot be sure. The older child stops digging. Do we know where we're going? You lean on the tool. Yes. The child waits. You add, we just cannot see it yet. That answer seems to satisfy them. Strangely, it satisfies you too. The trail is still there, under snow. The road has not vanished merely because you cannot see the wheel marks. You return to digging. Snow flies aside. The wheel slowly emerges behind you. The wagon sits heavy and silent, carrying children, illness, food, blankets, tools, and everything you cannot afford to abandon. You clear another section, then another. Morning continues brightening. Nothing has been solved. But for the first time since the storm began, you are doing something that points toward movement. And before those wheels can turn again, you are going to have to dig much deeper. You drive the edge of the board into the packed snow beside the wheel and feel it stop with a dull thud. Not earth, ice, or something close enough to ice that your shoulders immediately object. You scrape again. A crust breaks loose and slides beneath the wagon. The older child kneels nearby, clearing softer snow with gloved hands until you tell them to use the board instead. Wet gloves are becoming a recurring theme, and you have no interest in adding frozen fingers to today's collection of problems. The first wheel gradually appears. Wooden spokes emerge from the white, then the rim, then the packed mass beneath it. You move to the second wheel. This one is worse. The wind has piled snow against the wagon overnight, and the drift reaches higher here. You dig a narrow path along the side, throwing each load away from the wheels rather than directly behind you. There is no point clearing snow twice. You learn of that lesson approximately 6 minutes ago. Your breathing grows heavier. Cold air scratches your throat. The work warms your body beneath the coat, which creates another problem. Sweat can dampen clothing, and damp clothing becomes dangerous when you stop moving, so you slow down. This is not a race. Strength is another supply. You must ration it too. The older child wants to keep working quickly. You tell them to rest. I am not tired. Rest anyway. They lean dramatically against the wagon as though recovering from a lifetime in the mines. You continue scraping. Overland wagons endure extraordinary punishment even without snow. Wheels strike rocks, descend steep slopes, cross streams, sink into mud, and roll over rough ground for months. Travellers therefore carry tools and spare materials for repairs. Axle grease is essential because friction can damage wooden axles. While spare parts or repairable pieces of iron may mean the difference between continuing and abandoning a wagon, you inspect the exposed wheel carefully. No obvious split. The rim appears sound. The hub looks intact. Good. You crouch and examine the axle area. The grease is thick from the cold. You wipe away snow. Everything seems secure. One fewer disaster. You're becoming wealthy in disasters that have not happened. The second wheel finally emerges, then the third, then the fourth. By the time all four are visible, your back feels as though someone has replaced the muscles with rope. You stand upright slowly. The wagon remains exactly where it was. Rude. You look beneath it. Snow is packed under the wagon bed and around the running gear. The wheels may be exposed, but that does not mean they can roll freely. You begin clearing a channel ahead. The question is how far? 10 feet, 20, 100. You cannot shovel a road to Oregon. You only need enough space to test the wagon. The older child returns to work. Together you cut 2 rough tracks ahead of the wheels, following the direction you believe offers the best ground. The snow is inconsistent. Some sections are powder, others are compacted by wind. Beneath one patch, your tool sinks suddenly into mud. You stare at it. Of course, snow above, mud below, a delightful layered dessert of inconvenience. Frozen mornings and thawing ground can make wagon travel especially difficult. Mud is one of the most common obstacles described in overland accounts. Wheels sink, animals strain, and wagons may need to be unloaded or pulled free with extra teams. Snow merely provides a decorative topping. You probe farther. The ground near the wagon seems firmer. Ahead, less certain. You decide not to attempt movement until you understand the surface better. First, the harness. You retrieve the gear and inspect each piece. Leather straps are stiff. Buckles are cold enough to hurt your fingertips. You flex the leather gently rather than forcing it. A cracked strap could become a serious problem once the animals begin pulling. One small historical oddity hides in the wagon's maintenance supplies. Grease for axles can come from animal fats, and travellers may improvise when prepared lubricant runs short. Tar, grease, and other messy substances become vital companions on the trail. The Great Westward Migration has paintings full of sunsets. Far fewer paintings feature someone crouched beside a wheel holding a container of axle grease. History has preferences. You check the wheel hubs again. If you attempt to move, you want every mechanical advantage available. The children emerge from the wagon. The youngest has been forbidden from digging and therefore begins walking through your cleared track. You watch tiny footprints appear exactly where you just worked. Please don't. The child stops. Why? 'Cause I cleared that. A pause. Can I walk over there? They point to untouched snow. Yes. Off they go. Problem redirected. You inspect the wagon load next. Weight matters. If the wheels sink, you may have to unload part of the cargo. That possibility is deeply unattractive. Unloading means carrying boxes, sacks, bedding, tools, and supplies into the snow, then loading them again later. Still, emigrants sometimes lighten wagons to overcome difficult terrain. On steep hills, teams can be doubled, with animals from one wagon helping another at river crossings. Cargo may be removed and transported separately. Cooperation can be essential. You look around. No neighbouring wagon, no extra team. Just your animals. That settles the matter. If you move carefully. The sick traveller coughs inside. You climb into the wagon to check. The fever remains. The patient looks exhausted. You offer water. A little more is accepted than before. That feels encouraging. You ask about the chest. Still painful. You ask whether the patient feels strong enough to travel if the wagon can move. The answer comes after a pause. Yes, you do not believe it. Neither does the patient. But you understand the desire behind the answer. Staying feels dangerous. Movement feels like rescue. The trouble is that movement can also make everything worse. Researchers have reached different conclusions about how emigrant parties balance speed against recovery when illness struck. Some diaries show families stopping for sick members, while other accounts describe ill travellers continuing in wagons because seasonal pressure made long delays risky. Decisions depended upon severity, weather, company expectations, animals, supplies, and proximity to assistance. There is no universal rule. You have to decide. Not yet. You return outside. The older child has cleared another section. You praise the work. The child immediately digs faster. You remind them to slow down. Strength is a supply. Remember, you approach the oxen. They have rested, but they are not fresh. Yesterday's travel and the cold night have taken energy. You provide feed and inspect them carefully. Legs, hooves, harness points, eyes, breathing. One animal shifts impatiently. Another seems content to stand forever. You wish you could ask for a formal vote. You bring the team toward the wagon. Harnessing in the cold takes longer than usual. Stiff leather resists your fingers. The animals move at inconvenient moments. Eventually everything's connected. The wagon waits behind them. The children watch from inside. You take your position. Easy. The oxen lean forward. Harness tightens. Wood creaks. The wagon moves perhaps an inch, then stops. You encourage the team again. They pull. One wheel rotates slightly. Another remains lodged. You stop immediately. No point exhausting them. You return to the stubborn wheel and dig deeper. Packed snow has formed behind it. You clear that. Then mud from beneath the snow clings to the rim. You scrape it away. Another attempt. The team leans. The wagon groans. This time the wheel turns. Half a rotation. Then another. The wagon moves forward several feet. The children cheer. You almost do too. Then the left wheel sinks. Deeply, the wagon tilts. Everything inside shifts. Someone cries out. You stop the animals. Silence. You stare at the wheel. Mud surrounds the lower rim. Snow hides the edges of the rut. You have moved perhaps 8 feet. An inspiring expedition. The wagon is now stuck in a slightly different location. You unhitch tension from the team and begin digging again. This time you clear mud as well as snow. You wedge material beneath the wheel to provide firmer purchase. The older child brings pieces of wood, useful pieces, not fuel. You place them carefully. Another pull. The wheel climbs. The wagon rolls forward. 10 feet. 15. Then you stop voluntarily. Enough. You have proved the wagon can move. You have not proved the trail is safe. That distinction may keep everyone alive. You secure the wagon again and let the animals rest. The children are disappointed. I thought we were leaving. Not yet. That phrase again. You look ahead at the white country. There are no visible tracks, no certainty about the ground, no guarantee the next drift is not deeper, and the patient cannot endure hours of violent jolting while you repeatedly bury the wheels. You wipe mud from your gloves. Your shoulders ache. Your stomach is already asking about food. The wagon sits only yards from where it began, but those yards have taught you something. You can dig it free. You can make it move. What you cannot do is force the landscape to become ready. So the tools remain beside the wheel, the team rests, the patient sleeps, and you begin to understand that survival may depend less upon pushing forward than upon knowing when to wait. Waiting sounds restful until you actually have to do it. You secure the wagon where it stands, several yards from its overnight position, and look back at the short scar you have carved through the snow. 8 feet of struggle. Then another few yards. All that digging, pulling, scraping, harnessing, unharnessing, and encouraging the oxen has produced a distance a modern person could cross without interrupting a conversation. Still, you learn something useful. The wagon can move. The question is whether it should. You lead the team back toward the sheltered side and give the animals time to recover. Steam rises faintly from their bodies. Their breathing slows. No more experiments for now. The children return inside. You follow them and immediately notice how much colder the wagon feels after the doors of your little canvas world have been opened repeatedly. The sick traveller is awake. How far you hesitate? A little. One child helpfully announces, hardly anywhere, "Thank you." You sit beside the patient and offer water. The fever remains, but the eyes seem clearer than they did during the night. That encourages you until another cough begins, deep and tiring. Progress in one direction, trouble in another. Much like the wagon, you begin preparing the next meal. Rationing has become more serious now because the storm has changed from an event into a delay. Yesterday you could imagine losing one evening. Now you have lost a morning, perhaps the afternoon too, perhaps tomorrow. You open the food stores and calculate again. Flour, bacon, beans, coffee, dried food, salt, whatever remains of sugar. You estimate how many meals can be stretched from each supply. Then you estimate again with smaller portions. This is how optimism slowly becomes arithmetic. Trail emigrants often begin their journeys with hundreds of pounds of provisions, and guidebooks commonly recommend substantial quantities of flour, bacon, sugar, coffee, rice, dried fruit, and other durable foods. Yet the usefulness of those recommendations depends upon the length of the journey, number of people, condition of the animals, and delays encountered along the way. A wagon can look generously supplied in Missouri and alarmingly empty months later. You measure flour more carefully than yesterday. The children notice. Nobody complains. That worries you more than complaining would. You make a thin meal and give the patient something warm. The youngest child asks for another portion. You say there will be more later. When later? How much later? You look toward the older child. The older child looks away, wisely refusing involvement. After a while, the youngest considers this deeply. Apparently time itself has become suspicious. You hand over one small extra bite. There, diplomacy. After eating, you inspect the fuel. The pile is becoming uncomfortable to look at. Wood has always been unevenly available along the overland routes. In timbered regions it may be plentiful, across open plains. Emigrants can rely on dried buffalo dung or other substitutes in heavily travelled areas. Thousands of people gathering fuel can strip campsites of easy supplies, but snow has covered whatever this place might offer. You cannot send children wandering through a white landscape searching for wood. You cannot go far yourself without risking separation from the wagon, so every flame must justify itself. Cooking, heating water, perhaps a little warmth when necessary. Nothing decorative, no cheerful campfire simply because it improves morale. Morale will have to make its own arrangements. You step outside and scan the horizon again. The sky is brighter, the wind is weaker. Still no travellers. You climb onto a slightly higher patch of ground. From there, the wagon looks almost swallowed by the landscape. You call out, "Hello." Your voice travels strangely through the cold air. Nothing answers. You call again. Still nothing. For a moment you consider walking farther. Perhaps another wagon is beyond that low rise. Perhaps there is timber. Perhaps a camp. Perhaps help. The thought is seductive. You could take the older child or go alone, follow a straight line, leave markers. Surely you could manage a mile. Then you turn and look at the wagon. It already seems smaller from here. The white ground offers few landmarks. Clouds flatten the light, making slopes difficult to judge. A shallow depression disappears until you are standing in it. You remember how quickly last night's tracks vanished. No, you return. People can become disoriented in snow even when they know the landscape. Familiar features disappear, while wind and falling snow obscure tracks on open terrain. A traveller who believes they're walking straight may gradually turn without realizing it. The wagon is shelter. The wagon is food. The wagon is the patient. The wagon is the children. Leaving it casually would be foolish. There are historical accounts of emigrants travelling ahead or back along the trail to seek assistance, find missing animals, locate water, or reach settlements. Sometimes those journeys succeed. Sometimes the person searching becomes another person who needs searching for. Today, you stay. A lesser-known trail practice comes to mind as you inspect the remaining stores. Travellers sometimes leave written notes for companions behind them, placing messages at camps, landmarks, graves, or other obvious points along the route. Notes might report conditions ahead, warn of bad water, explain a route choice, or tell friends where a party has gone. The Oregon Trail has its own slow version of messaging. No signal, no battery. Just a scrap of paper hoping the intended person eventually walks past the correct rock. You could consider leaving some visible sign if you eventually move, especially if you believe other travellers may be following. Not now. There is nowhere obvious to put it where snow will not cover it. The afternoon passes slowly. You dry what clothing you can. You check the animals. You clear fresh snow from around the wheels. You feed the patient. You melt snow for water. You ration fuel. You repeat tasks because repeating tasks is safer than doing nothing. The children become restless. One begins counting objects inside the wagon. 3 cups, 2 pans, 4 sacks, 1 lantern. Then the count becomes less reliable. 7 blankets. There aren't 7. Yes, there are. That is a coat. It can be a blanket. You decide the child has made a legitimate historical argument. Objects on the trail frequently serve more than one purpose. A coat can indeed become bedding, a box can become a seat, a wagon can become a bedroom, a spoon can become the subject of a 20-minute dispute. You intervene before reaching that stage. The patient sleeps through much of the afternoon. You watch the breathing. Steady. Still rough. The fever seems slightly lower when you check again. You do not trust the improvement yet, but you allow yourself to notice it. Academic interpretations differ over how frequently emigrants face genuine food shortages compared with temporary anxiety about supplies. Diaries can record complaints of scarcity even when some provisions remain. Because travellers are calculating not only today's hunger, but also hundreds of miles still ahead. Having food in the wagon does not mean you have enough food. That distinction is becoming very clear. You have flour. You also have a long road west. You have feed. You also have animals that must pull tomorrow, and the day after that, and perhaps many days beyond. You have fuel. You also have another night approaching. You look toward the sky. The afternoon light is already changing. Clouds remain thick, though the falling snow has nearly stopped. The temptation to move returns, if you harness now. Perhaps you could travel before darkness. Perhaps you could find other emigrants. Perhaps you could reach better shelter. Perhaps. The word is dangerous. You walk several hundred paces ahead, keeping the wagon clearly visible. The snow deepens near a shallow rise. Beyond it, the ground falls away. You probe with your stick. Soft snow, then mud, then something firmer. The route ahead is uncertain. You look back. A child stands beside the wagon watching you. Even from this distance, you can tell which one. That decides it. You return. No travel today. The children are disappointed when you say so. The patient says nothing. You see relief in the tired face anyway. You begin preparing for another night. Less fuel, less food, more experience. The wagon is positioned securely. The animals remain close. Bedding is rearranged. Wet garments are moved. The lantern is prepared. Supper will be smaller. You expect complaints. Instead, the youngest child asks whether you can tell another story. You smile. That resource, at least, is not rationed. Outside, the last snowflakes drift through the grey evening. Inside, the family settles once more beneath the canvas. You have spent the entire day trying to leave. Now you prepare to remain. And as darkness gathers again, stories, songs, rumours, memories, and whatever scraps of amusement you can summon become another kind of provision. One that weighs nothing in the wagon and somehow keeps everyone going. The story begins before supper is completely finished. Not because you planned it that way. The youngest child simply asked what happened to the dog. You look up from the cup in your hands. What dog? The dog from last night's story. There was no dog. You're almost certain there was no dog. Apparently your audience has begun contributing to the narrative. You think for a moment and decide that yes, of course, there was a dog. A very sensible dog. Naturally. Which is why it remained somewhere warm instead of joining a family on a snowbound trail. The children object that the dog must come west. Fine. The dog comes west. It is large, friendly, and conveniently requires no food. This is the finest animal you have encountered all journey. Outside, evening settles over the snow. The storm has weakened to occasional drifting flakes, and without the constant roar of wind, the wagon seems strangely quiet. Inside, supper has left everyone warmer. Not full, warmer. Tonight that distinction is enough. The sick traveller lies beneath the quilts, listening with closed eyes. The fever remains, but feels less fierce. You have stopped checking every few minutes because there is little value in repeatedly confirming the same thing. Instead, you talk. Stories cost no flour, songs consume no firewood, memories do not require ox feed, so the family spends freely. The imaginary dog reaches a river, naturally. Every story about travelling west eventually seems to reach a river. The children immediately begin deciding how the dog crosses. It swims, no, it rides in the wagon. It cannot ride in the wagon. Why? Because dogs walk. You allow the argument to continue. It is useful noise. For much of the overland journey, evenings can provide rare moments of social life after the day's labour ends. Emigrants gather around fires, visit neighbouring wagons, write diaries and letters, repair clothing, clean equipment, play music, sing hymns, tell stories, and exchange news. When several families camp together, information travels almost as eagerly as people do who cross the river safely. Where is the next good water? How expensive are supplies at the next trading post? Has anyone seen the missing cow? Is that shortcut actually shorter? Everyone knows something. Unfortunately, not everyone knows something true. Trail gossip can move quickly. One traveller hears that the next river is dangerously high. Another hears it is perfectly manageable. Someone else insists there is a ferry. A fourth person claims the ferry washed away by breakfast. The river may have become a raging inland sea, populated entirely by dishonest ferrymen. You learn to listen carefully. The older child asks for a real story now, as what kind something that happened. You glance toward the sick traveller. The eyes remain closed, but there is the faintest hint of a smile. You begin with a memory from earlier in the journey. A morning on the plains, warm sunlight, grass moving beneath a gentle breeze, perhaps a herd of distant animals, perhaps another wagon company passing nearby. You describe the dust. The children groan. Everyone remembers the dust. It gets into clothing, hair, food, blankets, eyes, mouths. Wagons travelling closely together can raise enormous clouds, especially during dry weather. Some parties spread out across open ground, partly to escape one another's dust. The youngest child announces that snow is better. You look toward the canvas. Is it a pause? No. Good. Historical perspective achieved. You tell another memory. This one involves a river crossing where somebody lost a hat. The hat floated away. The owner chased it along the bank. Someone tried reaching it with a pole. The pole was dropped. Another person attempted to retrieve the pole. Soon 3 adults were involved in rescuing one hat. The children begin laughing. The patient coughs, then laughs weakly too. You had almost forgotten that part. Perhaps you have improved the story. That is allowed. Memory is not a court transcript. One charming detail from emigrant accounts is how often ordinary entertainment appears amid enormous hardship. Some wagon parties carry fiddles. People dance when conditions allow. Children play games. Travellers celebrate holidays and birthdays. Weddings even occur during western journeys. Imagine crossing hundreds of miles through mud, heat, mosquitoes, illness, and broken wheels. Then deciding what everyone really needs is a wedding. To be fair, cake improves most situations. If there is cake, you have no cake. You do, however, have songs. The older child begins one. You recognize it immediately and join quietly. The youngest comes in at entirely the wrong moment. Nobody corrects them. Your voices fill the wagon. The canvas softens the sound, creating the strange impression that you are singing inside a tent. Cupboard, bedroom, pantry, and storage shed all at once. The patient joins for a few words, then stops to breathe. You continue. Music changes the space. The wagon is still cold, still cramped, still stranded, yet for several minutes. Those facts retreat. The children request another song. You choose something slower. Outside. One ox shifts. The bell rings faintly. The note somehow fits. When the song ends, nobody speaks immediately. The quiet feels pleasant now rather than frightening. You adjust the blanket around the patient. Better, a little. You accept that. The children begin a guessing game. One thinks of an animal, the others ask questions. Does it have 4 legs? Yes. Is it an ox? No. Is it another ox? You suppress a smile. The game proceeds with alarming inefficiency. Eventually the animal turns out to be a chicken. Nobody guesses it. The youngest claims victory. The older child accuses them of changing the answer halfway through. A serious allegation. You decline to investigate. Researchers examining emigrant diaries still differ on how representative the surviving written record is of everyday social life. Literate adults produced most surviving journals, while the voices of young children, hired labourers, poorer migrants, and people too exhausted to write can be much harder to recover. A diary may carefully record mileage and weather while barely mentioning hours of conversation around a campfire. The quiet parts of history leave quiet evidence. You think about that as the children continue playing. If someone found your record of this journey decades from now, what would they know? Would you mention the argument about the quilt, the imaginary dog, the 3-eyed face drawn on a cup? Would you record how the older child volunteered to hold a damp cloth against a fevered forehead? Or would you simply write stopped by snow, patient ill, cold night, Those words would be true. They would also miss nearly everything. The youngest child asks whether there are stories about people who travelled this road before you. There are. You tell them that indigenous peoples have lived, travelled, hunted, traded, and maintained communities across these lands long before emigrant wagon routes became famous. The trails west do not cross an empty wilderness. They pass through homelands with histories far older than the wagon tracks. The children listen. You explain simply. Different peoples know these rivers. Plains, mountains, plants, animals, and seasons in ways newcomers often do not. Emigrants frequently depend on knowledge, trade, ferries, guides, food, horses, and assistance connected to native communities. Even as the growing migration contributes to dispossession, conflict, environmental pressure, and profound disruption, that part is harder to turn into a bedtime adventure. So you don't pretend it is simple. The older child asks whether people live near here before the trail. Very likely. Where are they? You look beyond the canvas, not where we can see them. The answer hangs there. History is full of people who disappear from one person's story while remaining central to another. You let the thought settle. Then the youngest child asks whether the imaginary dog has crossed the river yet. Back to urgent matters. Yes. The dog crosses, apparently by boat now. Nobody explains where the boat came from. You describe it reaching the opposite bank and shaking water over everyone. The children laugh again. The patient smiles. The lantern burns low. You stretch your legs carefully and feel the day's labour in every muscle. Tomorrow may bring more digging, or movement, or another day of waiting. But tonight the wagon contains something it didn't contain yesterday. Routine. You know where everyone sleeps. You know which gap admits the worst draft. You know where the cup belongs. You know which ox bell you expect to hear. Even hardship becomes familiar if repeated often enough. The children grow quieter. The guessing game ends. The youngest asks one final question. What happens to the dog? You lower your voice. It keeps going. Does it get there? Yes. Are you sure you look at the sleeping faces, the low lantern, the sick traveller, the hanging clothes, the dwindling stores? Yes. The child accepts this and closes their eyes. You remain awake a while longer. The silence outside has deepened. No fresh snow scratches the canvas. No hard gust shakes the wagon. You hear only the animals and the soft breathing around you. For the first time since the blizzard began, the weather itself seems tired. But as the night settles, another smell reaches you from the cramped wagon interior, reminding you that cold and hunger are not the only problems created when several people live for days inside a tiny shelter. Morning will bring the less poetic business of cleanliness, waste, damp bedding, and supplies that cannot continue shrinking forever. The smell is waiting for you when you wake. It is not dramatic. Nothing has exploded. Nobody has discovered a dead animal beneath the blankets. It is simply the accumulated atmosphere of too many people living inside too little space. Damp wool, unwashed bodies, smoke, leather, old food, wet boots, sickness, and the unavoidable consequences of several human beings spending another freezing night in a wagon without plumbing. You open your eyes. Grey morning light filters through the canvas. The youngest child is still asleep, 1 foot outside the quilt. You tuck it back underneath. The sick traveller is breathing more evenly than yesterday, which gives you a moment of relief. Then your nose reminds you of everything else. Today, sanitation becomes a priority. You open the rear flap slightly. Cold air rushes in. Someone beneath the blankets protests. You ignore this. Fresh air is necessary. The wagon has become damp from breathing bodies, wet clothing, cooking nearby, and condensation, Moisture clings to fabric and wood. You widen the opening for a minute. The older child wakes. Why is it cold? Because we need air. We had smells. The child considers this. No argument. Outside. The sky is lighter than yesterday. No snow is falling. The wind has fallen to a weak breeze. That should feel like victory. Instead, you're thinking about waste. History is cruel that way. Popular images of the Oregon Trail give you wagons against sunsets. They rarely give you someone carrying a container away from camp because a child needed to relieve themselves at 2 a.m, yet sanitation is a serious concern. Human waste near water sources contributes to disease, particularly when thousands of emigrants use the same travel corridor. Cholera, dysentery, and other gastrointestinal illnesses can spread rapidly where water becomes contaminated. You're stranded away from a crowded campsite, but the basic rule remains obvious. Waste belongs away from living space and away from any water you intend to use. You prepare to go outside. The older child asks what you're doing. You tell them. They suddenly become fascinated by the wagon ceiling. Wonderful. You carry what needs carrying to a sensible location, far enough from the wagon to separate it from camp, but close enough that you remain visible. The snow complicates everything. You scrape down and deal with the problem as practically as possible. There is no elegant frontier solution, just distance, burial, cleanliness, and common sense. You return and wash your hands as carefully as your limited water permits. Water itself now deserves attention. You have been melting snow. That works. But it costs fuel. You examine the remaining wood. Not encouraging. You could search farther now that visibility has improved. But first, bedding. You drag several damp pieces outside and spread them where air can reach them. There is no strong sun, yet even cold dry air may help. The children carry smaller items. One emerges holding a stocking between 2 fingers. Is this mine? You inspect it. No. The child immediately drops it. Apparently the stocking became dangerous once ownership changed. You pick it up, carry it, but it isn't mine. History will remember your sacrifice. The stocking is carried. You shake blankets, bits of dried mud, crumbs, and mysterious trail debris fall onto the snow. One crumb attracts immediate attention. The youngest child points. Food. No. Could be. It is not. You kick snow over it before historical archaeology begins. Cleaning the wagon reveals another concern. Some food containers are damp along the outside. You inspect each one. Flour must remain dry. So must meal and grain. Moisture can spoil supplies, encourage mold, and ruin exactly the foods you depend upon most. You move the sacks away from the dampest wagon wall and check for leaks. One seam looks strained. You reinforce it. Another container has been rubbed repeatedly by a nearby tool. You reposition both. The wagon load has shifted during the storm and yesterday's attempts to move. Small damage accumulates quietly. A sack does not need to burst dramatically to become a problem. A little flour leaking every mile is still lost food. A well-known reality of overland migration is that disease kills more emigrants than most violent dangers celebrated in later frontier mythology. Contaminated water, poor sanitation, crowded camping areas, and limited medical treatment create conditions in which an ordinary infection can become lethal. The trail's great enemy is often invisible. Not a wolf, not a bandit, not some theatrical menace waiting behind a rock. Sometimes it is simply water that should not have been drunk. You check the patient's cup carefully before refilling it. Clean enough. You rinse it. The sick traveller wakes. The fever feels lower, definitely lower now. You allow yourself to believe this improvement. How long have we been stopped? You answer. The patient closes their eyes again. Too long. Yes. Supplies agree. You prepare breakfast. Smaller again. Nobody misses this. The older child eats slowly. perhaps trying to make the portion last. The youngest does the opposite and finishes immediately, then watches everyone else. You recognize the strategy. No, I didn't ask. You were about to. I was thinking. Think about something else. The child sighs, a masterpiece of suffering. You give the patient warm gruel and more water. Appetite remains weak, but several spoonfuls are taken. That is useful. Outside. The oxen need feed again. You inspect what remains. Enough for now, not enough to become comfortable. The animals cannot depend on stored feed indefinitely. They need access to forage, and snow has covered most of it nearby. You walk to a wind-scoured patch where grass tips show through. The oxen might manage some grazing there if supervised. You lead them over. They begin nosing through the snow. One uses its muzzle to push aside the powder. There is a small but fascinating behaviour here that travellers often observe in livestock. Cattle can paw or nose through light snow to reach grass beneath. But deep-crusted snow makes grazing far more difficult and costs precious energy. Your oxen are not snowplows, though given the morning's workload, you briefly consider asking. You leave them grazing under watch and scan the country. Visibility is much better. The distant ridge you glimpsed yesterday is visible now. That helps orient you. You can identify the direction of the trail with greater confidence. No wagons appear, no smoke, no people. You walk farther than yesterday, still keeping your camp in sight. The snow thins on exposed ground. Drifts remain deep in hollows. Travel may soon be possible. Perhaps tomorrow. Perhaps later today. Then you notice something. Tracks. Not wagon tracks. Animal tracks. They cross the snow ahead and vanish toward the ridge. You examine them without pretending to be an expert. Probably deer or another wild animal. The children would enjoy seeing them. You turn back, then stop. Near the tracks lies something dark. Wood. You approach. A broken branch. Partly buried. Then another. Farther ahead. Scrub and low vegetation emerge where wind has stripped the snow. Fuel. Not much, but enough to matter. You gather what you can carry without exhausting yourself. The wood is partly damp, yet some pieces may dry near the wagon. When you return, the children react as though you have discovered treasure. In a way, you have. A peculiar aspect of trail economics is how quickly worthless objects become valuable when circumstances change. Dried dung becomes fuel. A scrap of iron becomes repair material. A broken crate becomes kindling. A discarded piece of rope may save a load. Value on the trail is brutally practical. A polished chair may be useless. A dry stick may be priceless. You stack the gathered fuel beneath shelter. Then you notice the wagon's rear fastening. The rope is frayed. Not badly, but enough. You inspect it. Repeated wind and strain have worked against the fibres. You replace the section before it fails. Another quiet problem caught early. Researchers continue to question how much emigrant success depended on preparation versus adaptation. Lists of recommended supplies certainly mattered, but no family could predict every broken strap. Sick child, flooded river, exhausted animal, or sudden storm. Improvisation was not merely a colourful frontier trait, it was often the difference between inconvenience and catastrophe. You've been improvising for 2 days. Now the margin is narrowing. Food lower, fuel lower, feed lower. Patience lower, the weather, at least, is improving. By afternoon, patches of pale sky appear between clouds. The children stand outside and look upward. The youngest points. Blue. You follow the finger. A small opening has appeared. Actual blue sky. It looks almost absurdly beautiful. Sunlight reaches the snow for a few seconds. Everything brightens. Then the cloud moves across again. But you saw it. The storm is breaking. You should feel only relief. Instead, your eyes return to the supplies, The flour sack, the fuel, the animals, the patient. Better weather does not automatically make the wagon ready. It simply removes one excuse for staying. Soon you must choose. Wait until the sick traveller is stronger and risk consuming more supplies, or move while the weather offers a chance and risk exhausting everyone on a damaged, hidden trail. You stand beside the wagon as the clouds slowly separate. Water drips from the canvas edge. The snow has begun to soften. Somewhere beneath that white surface, the road west is returning, and with it comes the decision you have been postponing. Water falls from the canvas in slow, heavy drops. You stand beside the wagon and listen. Drip. A pause. Drip. After 2 days of snow striking cloth, wind pulling ropes, and ice whispering against the wagon bows, the sound feels almost luxurious, melting. You hold out your hand. A drop lands in your palm, cold, naturally. The weather is not suddenly warm. Nobody is preparing a picnic, but the air has changed enough that snow on the upper canvas is softening where weak sunlight reaches it. Above you, the clouds are breaking into uneven layers. Grey still dominates the sky, but blue appears between them in narrow openings. The children have noticed too. The youngest stands beside the wagon with face tilted upward. There. Yes. More blue. Yes. Does that mean we can go? You look toward the white trail. Children have an unfortunate habit of jumping directly from evidence to conclusions. It means the weather is improving. That means we can go. It means the weather is improving. The child recognizes a closed negotiation and wanders toward the older sibling. You inspect the sky again. The wind has shifted. Yesterday it drove directly across the wagon. Today it comes in weak, irregular breaths, occasionally stirring loose snow from the top of a drift. You watch those little streams of powder. They move in one direction, then stop a few minutes later. Another breeze comes from slightly farther south. That matters. Experienced travellers learn to watch weather because there is no forecast waiting in a pocket. Clouds, wind, temperature, animal behaviour, and local knowledge provide clues. Though clues are not guarantees, you look west. Clouds there seem thinner. The distant ridge is visible now without interruption. That alone makes the world feel larger. For 2 days your horizon has ended a few yards beyond the wagon. Now distance has returned. You can see patches of darker ground where wind has exposed grass. You can see shrubs. You can see the shallow depression you nearly considered using as shelter before the storm. It is filled with snow. You stare at it. Had you moved the wagon there, the drift might have reached much higher along the sides. A pleasant little reminder that sometimes survival includes decisions you did not realize were important. You say nothing. No need to frighten the children retroactively. The oxen are behaving differently as well. They have moved toward exposed grass and are searching more actively for forage. One pushes snow aside with its muzzle. Another walks several paces, lowers its head, and begins chewing. Their posture seems less withdrawn. During the worst of the storm, they stood close, heads low, conserving themselves. Now they move. That encourages you. Animals are not magical weather instruments, despite centuries of folklore suggesting otherwise. But their behaviour can reflect conditions directly around them. Livestock respond to wind, temperature, pressure, hunger, insects, and approaching disturbances. Still, people have always enjoyed treating animals as mysterious forecasters. Cows lying down rain. Birds flying low, storm. Cat washing behind its ears. Apparently weather is coming, though one suspects the cat has other priorities. You watch the oxen. They seem interested mainly in breakfast. Reasonable. You lead them toward a better patch and let them graze under supervision. The grass is flattened and wet but accessible. Every mouthful they find themselves is feed you do not have to remove from the wagon. That feels almost like gaining supplies. The older child joins you. Are they happier? They are eating. So yes, fair enough. You walk toward the ridge together. The snow is noticeably softer where sunlight has touched it. That creates new concerns. Softening snow can reveal mud underneath. You probe with your stick. Firm. Another step. Firm. Then the stick sinks. Mud. You mark the place mentally. The route cannot simply be judged by how white it looks. You need to read the ground. Where snow has blown thin, the surface may be firmer. Where drifts fill depressions, wheels could sink deeply. Where meltwater gathers, mud may become worse as the day progresses. The storm is leaving. Its consequences are becoming more complicated. A familiar fact about overland travel is that wagon companies often adjust their daily schedules according to weather and terrain. Travellers may start early to take advantage of cool temperatures, stop when animals need grazing, or wait for river levels and road conditions to improve. Progress is rarely a simple matter of moving from sunrise to sunset. Nature controls the timetable more than anyone likes to admit. You reach the low rise. From here, you can see farther along the probable route. No moving wagons, but something catches your attention. A dark line. You narrow your eyes. Tracks. You move closer. Yes. Not fresh wagon ruts exactly. The snow still covers most of the trail, but wind has exposed shallow depressions where repeated wheels compress the ground before the storm. You crouch. There. 2 faint parallel channels. You feel a strange surge of relief. The trail, not imagined, not guessed, there beneath your hand. You call the older child. Look, the child crouches beside you. At what you point. The trail. They stare. That. Yes, it looks like mud. It is historically important mud. The child accepts this with no enthusiasm. You follow the shallow marks for several yards. They vanish beneath another drift. Then appear again farther ahead. Direction confirmed. That changes everything. You're no longer deciding whether to travel blindly. You can trace the route, slowly, carefully. Perhaps soon. You return to the wagon with more confidence than you left it. Inside, the sick traveller is sitting upright. That is new. The blankets remain wrapped around the shoulders, and the face is tired. But sitting without support is an improvement. You check the forehead. Warm, not burning. How is the weather breaking? The patient nods. Then we should move. You do not answer immediately. Improvement is not recovery. You offer food. This time. Several spoonfuls disappear without argument. Another encouraging sign. You tell the patient about the exposed trail. The children listen. The youngest immediately begins gathering personal possessions. 1 mitten, a small object, a scrap of cloth. Apparently departure is imminent. You tell everyone to wait. The wagon must be checked first. You go outside and examine the canvas as it dries. Ropes are tightened. The frayed section replaced yesterday is holding well. Wheels remain sound. Axles appear serviceable. Harness is laid out and inspected again. Fuel is packed securely. Food stores are reorganized. You are not leaving yet. You are preparing to be able to leave. There is a difference. Historical accounts show that experienced emigrants frequently emphasize preparation before difficult stretches. Teams need rest. Loads need balancing. Water containers need filling. Repairs should be made before entering terrain where stopping could become dangerous. The ordinary work done before movement often determines whether movement succeeds. That is not exciting enough for paintings either. Nobody wants a grand canvas titled "Person checks rope again." Yet you check the rope again. Good rope. You approve. By midday, sunlight appears for longer stretches. Snow begins sliding from shrubs. Drops fall from the wagon. The children find a patch where the surface has developed a thin crust and immediately begin stepping through it for entertainment. Crunch, crunch, crunch. You allow this until their boots begin getting wet. then entertainment is cancelled. One curious trail belief involves weather signs read from smoke. Campers sometimes watch whether smoke rises cleanly or hangs low, associating its behaviour with changing atmospheric conditions. Your small fire produces a narrow column today. It rises farther than it did during the storm before drifting away. You take that as encouragement while remembering that smoke is not a contract. The afternoon becomes brighter. Cloud shadows move across the snow. The world has colour again. Brown grass, dark wood, blue sky, grey canvas, the oxen's coats. Even mud looks almost cheerful. You stand facing west. The air is still cold, but there is softness beneath it now. Somewhere water trickles beneath the snow. A bird calls from beyond the ridge. The sound stops you. You have heard almost nothing wild since the storm began. Another call answers. Life beyond the wagon has resumed. Interpretations vary among environmental historians about how emigrants understood severe weather on the trail. Some diary writers frame storms through religious language, others through practical observation, and others simply record conditions with astonishing brevity. Their responses reflect personality, culture, circumstance, and the fact that people experiencing history rarely know which moments future generations will consider dramatic. You know only what this moment means now. The storm is ending. You have survived the worst of it, but surviving the storm and surviving the decision after the storm are two different things. You examine the trail once more before evening. The exposed sections are clearer, snow in the hollows remains deep. The ground is beginning to soften where sunlight lingers if you move tomorrow morning. Colder overnight temperatures may firm the surface. That could help. Wait too late into tomorrow and mud may deepen. Leave too early and hidden ice may make slopes dangerous. You return to the wagon. The patient is resting. The children are hungry. The animals are grazing. Your supplies remain limited. The evidence is gathering around you. Wind weaker. Clouds lifting. Trail visible. Patient improving. Team feeding. Morning may offer your chance. You settle beneath the canvas as evening arrives. But tonight the wagon no longer feels like a refuge you might occupy indefinitely. It feels like a vessel waiting to move, and as the last daylight shines through the fabric, you begin weighing the question that can no longer be delayed: stay, or harness the team and go. You wake before the children because the decision has apparently been awake all night: stay, or move. The words have followed you through shallow sleep, appearing each time the wagon creaks or the patient coughs. Now morning light presses faintly through the canvas, and you know you cannot postpone the choice much longer. You reach toward the sick traveller first. The forehead is warm, but the fierce heat of the first night is gone. Breathing remains rough. The cough remains, yet the eyes open clearly when you whisper, "Morning." A tired answer comes back. That is encouraging. You offer water. Several swallows. More encouraging. Then you ask the question, "Can you travel?" The patient looks toward the canvas roof. Yes. You wait. A moment later comes the more truthful answer. "If we must." There it is. You climb outside. Cold grips the morning, but the sky is clear enough to reveal pale blue above the ridge. Frost has formed across yesterday's softened snow, giving the surface a thin crust. You press your boot against it. Crunch beneath the crust. The ground feels firmer than it did yesterday afternoon. This is the window you hoped for. Overnight cold has stiffened the muddy surface. Not everywhere, not permanently, but perhaps long enough. You walk to the faint trail marks you found yesterday. They are easier to see now. Two shallow channels emerge from beneath the snow, disappear, then return farther west. You follow them several hundred paces. The wagon remains visible behind you. The route ahead rises gradually toward firmer ground. No obvious deep hollow, no steep descent, no stream crossing. That is good. Then the trail disappears behind a low ridge. You stop. Beyond that point, you cannot know. Travel on the overland routes is built from decisions like this. Emigrants rarely possess complete information about what lies ahead. Guidebooks provide descriptions and mileage estimates, while other travellers share reports about water, grass, river crossings, road conditions, and campsites. But conditions change. A safe ford last week may be dangerous today. A grassy campsite may be grazed bare. A dry road may become mud after one storm. Information ages quickly on the trail. You turn back. The oxen are standing near the wagon. They look stronger after grazing yesterday. Though you know appearances can deceive, you inspect them closely. No obvious lameness. No injured legs. No animal refusing feed. Their breathing is normal. You run your hand along one shoulder, warm beneath the hair. The team can probably pull. Probably. That word joins perhaps in your growing collection of frontier vocabulary. Inside the wagon. The children are awake. The youngest asks immediately, "Are we going?" You do not answer yet. Breakfast first. A small meal. Warm food for the patient. Water for everyone. Feed for the animals. You want everybody starting with as much strength as you can provide. The children eat quickly. You tell them to slow down. They do not. At least some routines remain stable. Then you begin packing. Blankets are folded and positioned around the patient to reduce jolting. Supplies are secured. Cookware is wedged tightly. The medicine bottle is wrapped in cloth. Nothing heavy can be allowed to shift if a wheel drops into a hidden rut. You redistribute part of the load. A sack moves toward the center. Tools go lower. Loose objects disappear into boxes. The youngest child attempts to contribute by placing a mitten on top of the flour. You thank them. Every expedition needs a mitten officer. The patient watches your preparations. You decided almost. You have not fully. Because one concern remains larger than the others. The children. Adults can understand why discomfort is necessary. Children simply experience it. A wagon moving over frozen ruts will jolt violently. Cold air will enter through the canvas if you become stuck. Everyone may spend hours waiting while you dig. And if the patient worsens during travel, stopping again may place you in a worse location than this one. On the other hand, staying means consuming another day's supplies. The flour sack does not care about your caution. The fuel does not care about the fever. The ox feed certainly does not care. You inspect each store one final time. Enough to remain, enough to travel, not enough to do either indefinitely. A lesser-known feature of overland decision-making is the practice of consulting emigrant guidebooks, some written by people with first-hand experience, and others assembled from reports of varying reliability. Travellers could carry printed descriptions telling them where to find water, how far to the next landmark, and which route to choose. Naturally, 19th century travel advice has the same problem as modern travel advice. The person writing it is not standing where you are standing. Your guide may say the next camp lies 12 miles ahead. Wonderful. Is there 3 feet of snow there? No comment. You look west again. The sun is climbing. The crust will soften. That creates pressure, if you're going. Early is better. You call the older child outside. I need you to listen carefully today. The child nods. You stay close to the wagon. If I tell you to get inside, you get inside. If we stop, you do not wander. Another nod. No argument. The seriousness of your voice has done the work. You repeat simpler instructions to the younger children. One asks whether they can walk beside the wagon. Not at first. Why? Because the ground is difficult. I can walk on difficult ground. I know. Then why you give the answer generations of adults have eventually used when logic becomes exhausted. Because I said so. History survives another morning. You harness the oxen. Leather remains stiff, though easier to work than yesterday. Buckles close, straps lie correctly. The yoke settles into place. You check everything twice, then once more. Debate among scholars continues over how much autonomy individual families retained within organised wagon companies. Some groups elected captains and established rules, yet disagreements over pace, routes, livestock, camp locations, and responsibilities could divide parties. Families sometimes left companies, joined others, or travelled independently for stretches. Today you would welcome a captain, someone who could stand beside the wagon and say, with complete authority, "Go or stay." Then you could blame them later instead. The choice is yours. You walk ahead of the team. The morning is quiet. A bird calls somewhere beyond the ridge. Water drips from a branch as sunlight reaches it. The storm feels farther away now. You look back at the wagon, canvas patched with damp marks, snow around the wheels, children watching through the opening, a sick traveller resting among blankets, the entire household waiting for your decision. You think about what staying offers. Known shelter, known ground, a place where the animals have found some forage, a patient who has begun improving. Then you think about what staying consumes: food, fuel, feed, time. You think about the season. Every day matters when mountains lie ahead. You cannot allow one storm to become several days of hesitation if the road is passable. So you decide, we go. The older child smiles. The youngest cheers from inside. The patient closes their eyes. You cannot tell whether that response is relief or worry. Probably both. You take hold of the guiding position and speak to the oxen. They lean forward, harness tightens, the wagon creaks. For one moment, nothing happens. Then the wheels turn. Slowly. The left wheel climbs from the shallow depression where it rested overnight. The right follows. Snow crunches beneath the rims. The wagon moves. 5 feet, 10, 20. You do not celebrate yet. The team continues. You follow the faint exposed trail, choosing the firmest ground you can see. The wagon reaches the place where you tested yesterday. One wheel slips slightly, then catches. Forward. The children remain silent now. They feel every jolt. You glance back. The patient is protected by blankets. No cry. Good. The ridge approaches. Beyond it lies unknown ground. You stop before the rise and walk ahead alone. At the top, the landscape opens. The trail descends gently. Snow covers much of it, but patches of brown earth show through, farther away, perhaps half a mile ahead. You see something that makes you stand completely still. Tracks. Real wagon tracks. Not old depressions. Fresh marks cutting through the snow. Someone has passed here since the storm. You crouch and touch the edge. Still crisp. You look along their direction. West. Human beings are ahead. Perhaps hours away. Perhaps less. You return to the wagon faster than you intended. The older child sees your face. What tracks? People probably. That word feels beautiful. You guide the oxen over the rise. The wagon follows. For the first time since the blizzard began. You're no longer travelling only by memory. Another wagon has marked the way. The tracks stretch westward across the snow. You place your wheels carefully into them. The team lowers its heads. The children settle behind you. The patient rests. And with the stranded campsite shrinking slowly in the distance, you begin moving back into the living current of the Oregon Trail. You follow the fresh wheel marks as though they are a letter written directly to you. 2 dark lines cut through the snow, sometimes clear, sometimes blurred where loose powder has drifted back across them. Between the wheel tracks are hoof prints and the broader impressions left by oxen. Someone has definitely passed this way. Recently. That knowledge changes the landscape. The country is still cold, The wagon still jolts, the patient is still sick. Yet you are no longer staring west into emptiness and wondering whether you have guessed the route correctly. Someone else has already made the guess. You hope they were competent. The oxen settle into their familiar pace, slow, steady, almost hypnotic. Their shoulders move beneath the yoke, and each step produces a soft crunch. Behind them, the wagon wheels turn through snow and exposed earth, creak, crunch, creak, crunch. You walk beside the team rather than ride. After days of confinement, movement feels surprisingly good. Your legs stretch, blood reaches your feet, cold air fills your lungs. Then the wagon strikes a hidden rut. Inside comes a chorus of complaints. You turn. Everyone all right? Yes. A pause. Then the youngest adds, that hurt. You slow the team. The sick traveller needs a gentler ride than the trail wants to provide. You choose the smoother sections you can, sometimes leaving the fresh tracks when they cross rough ground and returning to them farther ahead. Travel is not fast. You may be moving at 2 miles an hour, perhaps less. That is entirely ordinary for a loaded wagon under difficult conditions. Ox-drawn wagons commonly move at walking speed, and emigrants themselves spend enormous portions of the journey on foot. The famous migration west is therefore not really a long wagon ride. It is an extremely long walk accompanied by a wagon. This morning, you are grateful for every yard. The trail descends toward a shallow hollow. Snow lies deeper there. You stop. The tracks ahead enter it and continue out the other side. That is encouraging. Someone crossed. But perhaps their wagon was lighter. Perhaps they had more animals. Perhaps the snow was firmer when they passed. You probe the surface. The crust holds briefly, then breaks. Beneath it, packed snow reaches nearly to your knee. You return to the team. The older child watches. Can we cross? We're going to try. You tell everyone inside to hold tightly. The oxen move. The first steps are easy. Then snow deepens. Their legs push through the crust. The wagon enters. Resistance rises immediately. You hear it in the harness. Leather tightens. The animals lean. One wheel sinks into the existing rut. The other follows, for once. Another wagon's passage helps. Compressed snow beneath the wheels offers a firmer track. You encourage the team. Easy. They pull. The wagon keeps moving. Slowly, painfully, but moving. You walk beside the left wheel, watching it rotate, half a turn, another. Snow piles briefly ahead of the rim, then breaks aside. The oxen reach shallower ground. The wagon climbs after them. You exhale. Inside, the youngest child cheers. You allow this celebration. It was earned. Wagon parties sometimes cooperate by doubling teams when a difficult hill, muddy stretch, or riverbank overwhelms one wagon's animals. Oxen from another wagon can be added temporarily, increasing pulling power. You have no second team, but the tracks ahead are almost a form of assistance. They reveal where another driver succeeded. Not much, but enough. The trail rises gradually. Sunlight reflects from the snow so brightly that you narrow your eyes. The children complain that it hurts to look outside. They are right. Bright sunlight reflecting from snow can cause severe eye irritation and even temporary snow blindness after prolonged exposure. You tell them not to stare across the white ground. The youngest immediately stares across the white ground. You reposition the child away from the opening. There are accounts of travellers improvising eye protection against intense glare. And indigenous peoples in snowy regions have long used narrow-slit snow goggles made from materials such as bone, wood, or hide. Your family has no elegant snow goggles. A hat brim and common sense will have to serve. One of those resources is easier to obtain than the other. You continue. By late morning, patches of bare ground become more frequent. The snow is melting. Water runs in tiny channels through the wagon ruts. That creates mud. Of course it does. The trail apparently believes variety is important. You stop periodically to rest the animals. During one halt, you climb inside. The sick traveller looks exhausted. How bad? Not bad. You've learned to interpret that answer. You offer water. The patient drinks. The fever remains low. That is the best news of the morning. The children eat small pieces of dried food. You take a portion too. No cooking, no fire. You want daylight for travel after perhaps 20 minutes. You move again. The fresh tracks become clearer where snow thins. Then you notice something beside them. Dung. Ox dung. You've never been so pleased to see it. The youngest child leans toward the opening. What are you looking at? Nothing. You continue walking. Fresh livestock droppings mean the wagon ahead cannot be terribly far away. Perhaps a few hours, maybe less. The precise age is difficult to judge in cold weather, but it's another sign of human movement. You follow. The landscape gradually opens into rolling ground. A dark patch appears ahead. At first you think it is exposed soil. Then it moves. An ox. You stop. Another shape appears. Then canvas. A wagon. You stare. The older child sees it. People. The shout wakes everyone. You raise a hand. Someone near the distant wagon raises one back. Such a tiny gesture. You feel it through your whole body. You approach slowly. The other party has stopped on firmer ground where snow has blown thin. There are 2 wagons, several animals, and perhaps a handful of adults and children. No city, no fort, no doctor waiting at a desk. Yet after the isolation of the storm, it looks almost like civilization. One man walks toward you. He asks where you came from. You explain that you were stranded behind the ridge. He looks toward your wagon. Everyone living. Yes, the answer catches in your throat slightly. Everyone living. That is the measure. You ask about the trail ahead. Passable. He says, slow. Mud in places. Another group may be farther west. There is decent ground ahead for camping. Perhaps some wood too. Information. Actual information. You could hug him. You do not. 19th century social conventions survive. Instead, you thank him. The other travellers share what they know. One offers a little fuel. Another mentions where the snow is deepest. Someone asks whether you need help with the team. For now, no. But the offer itself feels warm. Researchers interpret cooperation on the emigrant trails in different ways. Some emphasize mutual aid among strangers facing shared danger, while others point to disputes over grazing, routes, leadership, property, and scarce resources. Both are visible in surviving accounts. People can quarrel bitterly one day and pull another family's wagon from mud the next. Human beings remain inconveniently complicated. You rest near the other wagons. The children immediately become interested in the other children. Within minutes, they're comparing storm experiences as though they are veterans from rival campaigns. Ours shook all night. So did ours. We had snow on the roof. We had more. Naturally. Competitive suffering begins early. You check the patient. Another traveller offers advice about the cough. You listen politely. The advice includes a remedy involving onions. You decide not to commit. Frontier medicine has enough surprises already. After the team rests, you prepare to continue with the others, not necessarily as one permanent company, just together for this stretch. That is enough. The wagons begin moving, one ahead, yours behind, another following. The sight is deeply reassuring. You watch the first wagon's wheels. Where it sinks, you steer slightly aside. Where it passes easily, you follow. The oxen seem almost more willing now, though perhaps that is imagination. By afternoon, the snow becomes patchier. Brown grass spreads across exposed slopes. The road reappears in sections, actual ruts, actual earth, the familiar scars of migration. You never expected to feel affection for wagon ruts. Yet here you are. The children walk briefly beside the wagon where ground is firm. Their voices drift through the cold air. The patient remains inside, sleeping through the motion. You continue west. The stranded campsite is now miles behind. You think of the little fire, the buried wheels, the canvas snapping in darkness, the ox bell beyond the storm. Already those moments feel strangely distant. That is another feature of travel. A crisis can consume your entire world, then become a place behind you. By late afternoon, the wagons reach sheltered ground near scattered trees. Someone suggests stopping. Nobody argues. The animals need rest. The patient needs rest. The children definitely need food. You guide the wagon into place. The wheels stop. But this time stopping feels different. You chose this camp. Other fires are nearby. Other voices move through the evening. Someone laughs. An axe strikes wood. Smoke rises into clear air. You stand beside the wagon and listen. For the first time since the blizzard began, the sounds around you are human. You have not reached Oregon. You have not reached safety in any final sense. Hundreds of miles may remain. There will be rivers, mountains, sickness, broken equipment, bad weather, and decisions you cannot yet imagine. But tonight you are back on the trail. And as the children gather near the other families and the sick traveller rests beneath a quieter canvas, you begin to understand how quickly one terrible night can become something you carry forward as memory. Smoke rises almost straight above the neighbouring fires. You notice that first. After nights of watching wind tear smoke sideways and flatten flames against the ground. A calm column climbing into the evening sky feels like a small miracle. Around you, camp settles into familiar noises. An axe strikes wood, a pan touches stone, oxen breathe and chew. Children talk somewhere beyond the wagon, their voices carrying through the cold air. You stand beside your wheel and listen. Human voices. You had not realized how much you missed them. The other emigrants have made camp loosely around the sheltered ground. No perfect circle, no dramatic formation. Just wagons positioned where terrain, animals, and common sense suggests they should go. Your wagon rests among them. That matters. For several days it was your entire world. Now it is one wagon among others again. You climb inside. The sick traveller is awake. The face still looks pale and tired, but the fever has eased considerably. You touch the forehead. Warm. Ordinarily warm. You almost check again just to enjoy the result. Instead, you offer water. The cup is taken without help. Another small victory. How far did we come? You give your best estimate. The patient nods. Feels farther. You understand. Every mile today contained a hidden rut, a drift, a patch of mud, or a reason to worry. The children return carrying news. Someone in the neighbouring camp has a fiddle. This information is delivered with the urgency of a military dispatch. A real fiddle. Yes. Are they playing it? Not yet. The children wait. Apparently you are responsible for scheduling frontier entertainment. Go listen if they play. Stay where I can see you. They vanish. You hear one of them immediately explaining the blizzard to another child. The story has already grown. By tomorrow, the snow may have reached the wagon roof. By next month, perhaps the oxen will have fought wolves. Memory works quickly when children are involved. You begin preparing supper. Tonight you use some of the fuel offered by the other travellers. You still conserve it. But the calculation feels less desperate. A small fire catches. Heat touches your hands. Food cooks. The smell reaches the children, who reappear with suspicious efficiency. You serve portions, not large. Supplies still matter. The trail ahead remains long. But nobody watches every spoonful with quite the same anxiety. The patient eats more than yesterday. You notice without commenting. Sometimes hope is safer when left quiet. The great overland migrations of the 19th century involve hundreds of thousands of people moving west along several routes. Especially during the decades surrounding the Oregon settlement movement and the California gold rush. Most journeys are not remembered individually. There are too many families. Too many camps. Too many ordinary days. Your blizzard will probably never become famous. No newspaper reporter is waiting. No monument will mark the drift where your wagon stopped. No future schoolchild will memorize the date when you dug snow from a wheel, while a child complained about wet stockings. And yet this is how large historical movements actually happen. One household at a time, one meal at a time, one frightened night followed by morning. The fiddle begins. A simple tune drifts across camp. The children stop eating. Everyone listens. The musician is not performing for history. Perhaps someone simply asked. Perhaps playing is a habit. Perhaps the fiddler needs the music as much as everyone listening does. The melody moves between the wagons. The oxen do not appear impressed. One continues chewing. A practical critic. You finish supper and carry the patient's cup inside. The sick traveller listens to the fiddle through the canvas. Nice. Yes, you sit nearby. For a while. Neither of you speaks. Quiet is different here. Not empty. Protected by ordinary activity. If something goes wrong tonight, there are people nearby. Extra hands. Extra animals. Extra knowledge. That does not guarantee safety. It changes the odds. Mutual assistance appears repeatedly in emigrant records. Travellers lend tools, help repair wagons, share information, care for sick neighbours, recover livestock, assist at river crossings, and combine teams when one wagon cannot manage difficult ground. They also argue, accuse, compete, and occasionally separate in anger. Community on the trail is not sentimental perfection. It is people discovering that survival is often easier when someone else owns a shovel. You look at the borrowed fuel beside the fire, an excellent social philosophy. Later, you inspect the wagon. The wheels survive today's travel. One section of canvas needs attention. A fastening has loosened. Nothing serious. You repair it before darkness deepens. The familiar motion of tightening rope brings back the first night of the storm. You remember standing outside while snow struck your face. You remember the children inside, the fever, the tangled ox, the sound of the canvas snapping above you. At the time, each problem seemed enormous. Now you can list them. That is what survival does to danger. It turns the present into a story. There is a curious tradition among some emigrants of recording names, dates, and messages on prominent rocks along western routes, at places such as Register Cliff in present-day Wyoming. Travellers carved or painted their names, leaving physical evidence of passage. You can understand the impulse. After so many miles, perhaps you want the landscape to acknowledge that you are here. A name on stone says something simple. I passed this place. I existed. I kept going. Your family leaves no carving tonight. The wagon tracks will do. Tomorrow they may freeze into mud. Later, rain may soften them. Another wagon may roll directly through yours. Eventually grass may cover everything. The landscape does not promise to remember. The people do. The older child sits beside you near the fire. Were you scared? The question arrives quietly. You could say no. Adults often do. Instead, you say yes. The child looks surprised when during the storm, all of it. Some of it, the child thinks, I was scared too. I know. Another pause. But we were all right. Yes. You look toward the wagon. We were. That does not mean everyone who faced winter weather on western trails was fortunate. Some journeys ended in tragedy, exposure, disease, Accidents, starvation, and delayed travel could become fatal, especially when emigrants entered mountain regions too late in the season. The most infamous examples can overshadow the many smaller emergencies that ended without catastrophe. Historical discussion remains open over how representative dramatic survival stories are of ordinary overland experience. Severe disasters naturally attract attention, while thousands of less spectacular hardships appear only as brief diary entries or family memories. A storm might occupy 3 lines in a journal. Those 3 lines might represent the longest night of someone's life. You understand that now. The fiddle shifts into a slower tune. Children begin returning to their wagons. You bank the fire safely, the oxen are settled, the patient is resting, blankets are arranged. You climb beneath the canvas one more time. The smell is familiar now. Wool, leather, smoke, food, people, home, temporarily. The youngest child curls beneath a quilt. Are we moving tomorrow if the weather holds? Will it? You smile in the darkness. We will see. No promises to the weather. You have learned that much. The lantern dims. Outside. Another wagon creaks as someone climbs inside. A voice calls good night. Someone answers. Then another. The camp slowly becomes still. You lie back. The wagon bed is just as hard as before. A box still occupies too much space. Your blanket still seems mysteriously shorter than your body. Yet everything feels softer tonight. Perhaps comfort is partly comparison. A roof feels stronger after you've heard it strain. A meal feels larger after rationing. A human voice feels warmer after silence. You close your eyes. Tomorrow. The trail continues west, but tonight you allow the journey to stop. The wagon stands quietly beneath a clearing sky, and for once, you do not need to listen for danger in every sound. You hear the ox bell, clink, then silence. You know the animal is there. You hear the patient breathe, slowly. You know the fever has eased. You hear a child turning beneath a quilt. You know everyone is close. And gradually, the memory of the blizzard begins to loosen its grip. The roaring wind becomes distant. The flying snow becomes soft. The buried wheels become only shapes beneath a morning sky. Your aching hands relax. Your shoulders settle. There is nothing left to dig tonight. Nothing left to harness. Nothing left to decide. The trail can wait beyond the darkness. For now, you remain beneath the canvas, surrounded by the quiet warmth of breathing bodies and the faint scent of wood smoke drifting through the camp. Outside, stars appear one by one. You cannot see all of them through the wagon cover, but you know they are there. The same sky stretches east toward the home you left, and west toward the home you hope to find. And perhaps that is enough. Your breathing slows. The wagon no longer seems cramped. It seems close, sheltered, still. The children sleep. The sick traveller sleeps. The animals rest on firm ground. Other families lie nearby beneath their own canvas covers, carrying their own worries, memories, hopes, and private stories westward. No one here knows exactly what waits beyond tomorrow. They do not need to know tonight. Neither do you. You have reached this fire, this camp, this quiet hour. The terrible weather has passed behind you, and the road ahead can remain unseen until morning. So the sounds grow softer now. The last conversation outside fades. The fiddle has gone silent. The fire settles into dead embers. Even the wagon seems to release its old creaks and become still beneath the stars. You feel the blanket against your hands, the steady weight of it, the warmth gathered beneath it. You hear one slow breath beside you, then another and another. Nothing asks anything from you. Not now. You do not need to measure flour. You do not need to watch the sky. You do not need to clear snow from canvas or search the darkness for an oxbell. You can simply lie here. The Oregon Trail stretches onward, but tonight it becomes only a faint road beneath moonlight, disappearing quietly toward distant country. Your wagon rests beside it, safe for this moment, warm enough, still enough, and the memory of snow becomes gentler with every breath, until it is no longer a storm around you, only a soft white landscape far behind. The night holds the wagon. The canvas barely moves, the children dream, and you let your eyes close, while the whole wide trail grows quiet at last. Sweet dreams.